Okay. Then do. Great. Okay. Okay. Good morning. Welcome to this Board of Trustees meeting. We are thrilled to be here in Presque Isle and had a lovely day yesterday, and thank President Rice and his team for just a wonderful tour and discussion and evening last night. So thank you very much. We do have, as I convene this meeting, we do have some members participating by technology, and I need therefore to read to you that the trustees participating by technology will be counted toward a quorum to confirm trustee attendance and to ensure the trustees are able to clearly hear and understand the proceedings and each other. The clerk will take a roll call of the members of the Board of Trustees joining by technology. Oh.
Good morning. Trustee Donnelly.
Present.
We couldn't hear you. Could you say something else?
Present.
I heard him say.
Great, thank you. Trustee Dobson.
Present.
Great, thank you.
Okay, great. And the meeting is still streamed to YouTube, although we are experimenting with trying to make Zoom work for these meetings, as you can see, and I appreciate Ellen and Heather's work. We may be having a little technology challenge as we try to figure this out, but it's an effort, it's an experiment, and we'll get it right. So thank you. The Board of Trustees meeting is being live streamed on YouTube with closed captioning available. To assist the captionist, please speak clearly into the mic to ensure that you are heard. So with that, I think we are ready to rock and roll. This is our citizen comment period, but no citizen has signed up to comment. So we have checked that off our agenda, but thank you very much. My next. I'm sorry. Nobody had signed up, but sure. I'm very sorry. Nobody had signed up, but there you are. Okay, that's all right. 3 minutes for citizen comment, please. Welcome.
Chair Riley, Chancellor Malloy, Board of Trustees. First of all, I'd like to welcome you to the Star City, Presque Isle, into this campus at the University of Presque Isle. My name is Steve Richard, class of 1973, and I also have had 2 daughters who have graduated from UMP. I would like to take this opportunity to share with you my opinion on a systems matter. When the announcement was made of the Harold Alfond Foundation gift of $900 million, I was very excited because at the time I was on the Board of Visitors for UMP, and I was wondering how this wonderful donation was going to be allocated to the various campuses. You can imagine how disappointed I was when I found out that the majority of the money was going to the complex at Orono, athletic complex at Orono, as well as the University of Southern Maine. When the Chancellor visited UMP several months after the announcement and at an open forum, which I attended, I asked the Chancellor, how come the University of Presque Isle did not receive any of the Alfond money? His answer was not really an answer. So I kind of just left it at that. Then last week, I read in the paper where an additional $28 million from a reserved account for additional money because of material overrun cost for the Orono project. I kind of chuckled to myself, as most businesses would have said, where can we make up some of the money or where can we cut some of the cost? $28 million, which included $7 million for a scoreboard and upgrade lighting. Do you know that UMP's baseball and softball team does not have a practice field? That the UMP softball and baseball players use the facilities at NSAD number 1, which is located here in Presque Isle. Any home games that they have, they also have to have that at that facility. So you can, I just can't even imagine other universities who come up here to play UMP's baseball and softball, wondering why they don't even have a field. Our soccer field is a grass field with poor drainage. It does have bleachers that was put there a few years ago. And yes, it has a loud speaker, not a sound system. Several of the dorms that we have haven't been upgraded since they were built. And you're voting today about giving an additional $28 million to Arno. I know that the argument probably is that the athletic field at Arno generates income. No question about that. But I also know that you, the Board of Trustees, have mandated that campuses in the university system have a balanced budget by the year 2023 without going into any of their reserves. How do you do that? Well, if you have a budget that's out of whack, there are two things that you can do. One, you can cut costs. Two, you can generate additional revenue. Cutting cost or cutting expenses to a university like the University of Presque Isle means cutting staff. Cutting staff means cutting programs. If UMPI could have a turf field with lights even, maybe that would generate more people to come to the University of Maine at Presque Isle. Because we have athletes who probably can't play at the Division I level, but certainly do want to play their dedicated sport, whether it's baseball, softball, or soccer. If we upgraded the dorms here at the University of Maine at Presque Isle, maybe more students would want to come and live here. More students, more revenue. More revenue, closer to a balanced budget. So today, as you think about raising your hand to vote on the $28 additional million for an athletic complex, I would hope that you would say to yourself, is there a better way to spend that money? That's just my opinion. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Just want to make sure anybody else for citizen comment? Appreciate those comments very much. Let me just make a few opening remarks and again, thank President Rice and his team and the faculty. We had a great tour of the campus. And as is the board's want, we asked too many questions and didn't get through the entire presentation. So we appreciate everybody's understanding. It was a terrific day. And I want to thank Trustee Martin for serving as Vice Chair Pro Tem. I think everybody knows Lisa has a pretty good excuse for not being here. Her son was married this weekend. So I think she's been a little bit busy. I have a duty now that's both a pleasure and very sad because it recognizes someone who's had to leave the board, but we wanted to propose this resolution and I will read it now. Whereas Timothy Doak served the University of Maine system with distinction as a trustee from June 2019 to March 2022. Whereas Trustee Doak has a Bachelor of Science in Education from the University of Maine at Presque Isle, a Master's of Education from the University of Maine, and a Certificate of Advanced Study in Educational Leadership from the University of Southern Maine. Whereas Trustee Doak has been an active voice and advocate for higher education. He was a member of the following Board of Trustees committees: Academic and Student Affairs, Finance, Facilities and Technology Committee, and served as a trustee representative on the Board of Trustees, Board of Visitors Executive Committee. Whereas his professional experience as a superintendent of schools for the Eastern Aroostook RSU number 39 for Caribou in Stockholm and MSAD number 20 in Fort Fairfield, along with a strong background in school finance, school construction, and education leadership, added great value indeed to Board of Trustees discussions and deliberations. Now, therefore, be it known to all that we, the University of Maine System Board of Trustees, offer our sincere gratitude, thanks, and best wishes to Tim Doak for his outstanding contributions to the quality of higher education in Maine. Approved on the 12th day of September 2022 by the University of Maine System Board of Trustees, acting as stewards of Maine's public universities and their nearly 30,000 students, 5,000 employees, and more than 200,000 living alumni. May I have a motion?
So moved.
Moved
moved.
by Trustee Flood, seconded by Trustee Cates. All those in favor? Dare anyone be opposed? Oh, and let's the roll call for the,
Trustee Dobson,
Yes.
trustee Donnelly,
Yes.
Tim Doak, please come forward.
Well, you didn't have to go to the all extremes of doing this, but I do like to personally thank Governor Mills and the Maine legislature for giving me the opportunity to serve on a great board as this. The biggest regret is I couldn't serve my second term. As you know, it got a little bit hectic in our schools for the last couple of years. And I felt it was just better to step back and give those schools the attention that I need and in myself and my own family. But one thing that COVID did teach us all, I hope, is the hidden potential in all of us. The things we had to go through in the University of Maine system was a leader and behind all of that, and the hidden potential in all of us as leaders that we could do this and get through the hardest times of our life, personally and professionally, was a tribute to the University of Maine system in the great state of Maine. So thank you. And you will be missed, but I think of you often. I do listen to your meetings still. And hopefully we look at the realities, we look at reimaging, and we look at repurposing everything we do in education going forward. So thank you.
Thank you, Tim. Okay, great. Let me continue. We will get to the resolution, but let me continue with the report, and we want to do the president's roundtable, and then we'll do tab 3. We have had a busy time since we last met. Vice Chair Eames and I have been meeting weekly with the Chancellor and been in constant communication. It's been very good, keeping that engagement going, which I think has been very, very productive. And we're very much pleased with that. I also wanted to let you all know that we have determined that we will propose a bylaw amendment to our own bylaws to make permanent the position of a sitting faculty representative, a non-voting member. We will develop that language to present in November and vote on it in January. And we look forward to engaging with our faculty reps to make sure we get the language right. But we did want to make clear that this is a commitment to our faculty reps and to keep their voice at the table permanently. So that's a bylaw change that will be forthcoming in November. I also wanted to just let the board know that we do have a board retreat planned for December 4th and 5th. We have much of the focus will be on our strategic plan and of course the budget. So we've created a small planning committee to sort of figure out what the agenda should be, and we'll share that with all of you, but it is in the works. Hold those dates and it will not snow. We've got the Ellen promises it's just not going to snow. So we're going to be just fine. And I think that sort of is my report. Why don't we do the president's roundtable and then come back to tab 3? And this is something we initiated last year with and started with the last meeting, last meeting. And the presidents were great in keeping to their 2 minutes in giving us updates of sort of what's new, what's cool, and what's good at your university. And why don't we begin with Lee, President softly.
You know, I prefer Queen,
I
but
do.
President is
I
a
also
wonderful.
prefer an hour, but you have.
Yeah, well, there's 2 minutes, 90 minutes. So quickly in 2 minutes, let me just say in the last month or two, the Chancellor has been twice to the University of Maine School of Law. He still comes into a building that we all hope to be out of very soon. It's been incredibly helpful to be in touch with the Chancellor regularly about all the things that are going on with the facilities pieces. And I will just say for the record, the building is going to be available on time and on budget. We could not be happier with the contractor. Consigli has been working with us very closely. Everything's going really well. In my second minute, let me just thank President Deb Hedin, who has been working with Maine Law to help us establish the very first rural justice clinic for the state of Maine. And we are hoping very soon to establish the clinic in Fort Kent, where lawyers and law students are desperately needed. And President Hedin has been working with us to provide space for our clinic students, space for the clinic itself. And we anticipate that this is going to be a very successful experiment with getting clinics out into our rural counties. And as soon as we can demonstrate the great success, we will be moving into other rural counties. And I'm just incredibly grateful for the partner I found in Fort Kent, and it is all moving ahead very quickly. And there's my 2 minutes.
Good, thank you. President Sekas.
Good morning. UMA being recognized as a veteran-friendly institution, we had our numbers of veterans on the campus up 35%. So we're proud of that fact. Another fact is our housing is at full capacity and supporting our academic programs, and we're excited about that. And finally, UMA received a generous and substantial donation, establishing a scholarship to support our aviation students. The donor saw our new Cirrus SR-20. I get to work the plane in again. That was a statement of our commitment to this academic program. This is a growing donation, and when it's all said and done, it will be the largest donation in UMA's 57-year history. So thank you.
President Edmondson.
I have been so thrilled to be part of our campuses these past few weeks as we welcome students back. I go out to my car in the morning and they greet me with "Good morning, President Edmondson." We have just the most amazing student population. And I have points of pride that could go on for hours. But I will share that we recently received $350,000 from the US EPA to work with the craft beer industry on pollution prevention practices. That may be something new to some of you. We are the first campus to have Kiwi bots. These are little robots that go across the campus and deliver food. And I've had wonderful interactions with students who are working to program them. In fact, I met one student named Isabella who was following the Kiwi bot to make sure that it was going where it was supposed to go, so that eventually it can cross the street on the Portland campus. One young man promised that he would program it so that the Kiwi bot could find the president's house too. So I was very, very happy about that. We are about to launch our biggest campaign in USM history. The launch event is on September 21st in the Abramson Community Center, starting at 4:30 p.m. I know the Chancellor is planning to join us. I'm really happy about that. You are all also invited. We have Megan Marino, who is an alumna of our School of Music and a world famous opera singer who will be performing that evening. And it's just a reminder to me of the strengths of our music and arts programs. We have alumni who are Emmy, Tony, Oscar, and Grammy Award winners. And so that's thrilling for us. Our Portland project continues on time and on budget. The garage is coming out of the ground, and you can actually see the new garage now. And we are really proud that we will be offering an urban residential experience. Our current housing subscription is at 110%. And then finally, I would like you to know that we welcomed our class with the highest GPA in years. We have a record number of honors students this fall. The number is 622. And so along with the increase in the average GPA of our entering class, this also shows that we're attracting top-notch students to USM. Thank you.
Great, thank you. I was afraid at first you were having a relationship with the robot. So.
Oh, no.
President Rice.
You heard from our institution yesterday for quite more than 2 minutes, so I won't reiterate any of that. But I will say, very pleased the work on Wadeen Gymnasium, which was initiated this just after graduation, just before graduation, is on schedule to be completed, even with a bunch of hiccups and issues that the construction team has been dealing with, to open on January 1st, which will be great to have our basketball teams, volleyball teams, et cetera, in that new gymnasium. And I also want to thank some members of the system office that participated in our convocation. It was great to have a live convocation and hundreds of students in Gentile Hall, and that energy has been sorely missed the past 2 years. So my thanks to everybody that was a part of that, making that special event happening, with the exception of the Olivia Newton-John references. And hopefully that just stays between the hundreds of people that were there, but thank you.
Okay, now we all have to follow up with Ray. President Farini Mundy.
Good morning, everybody. It's great to be able to talk, and I won't ask for the 90 minutes that President softly asked for, but I might ask for 4 because we have UMaine and the University of Maine at Machias.
Okay.
In any case, to be brief, it's been a fantastic start to the academic year on both campuses. The campuses are vibrant and students are feeling the wonderful sense of being back together again, taking advantage of all that we have to offer. At UMaine, I would point out a couple of key campus features. One, we had the grand opening of the Furland Engineering Education and Design Center this summer, a project that came in on time and on budget, and it's absolutely spectacular. The Chancellor, many members of the community joined us in person for that event, and there have been a number of tours since the event. Students are in classrooms, in labs, working. Faculty are unpacking boxes still, but it's a great lift to our engineering and computing programs to have that incredible center made possible by the generosity of a number of key donors, particularly the Furland family. I would also add that the P3 project for the building of a boutique hotel on campus using 2 of our most historic buildings, Holmes Hall and Coburn Hall, the construction fences went up this weekend, so I guess that means they're getting started. We will be watching that eagerly. A lot of interest already among faculty and staff and students for how we can take good advantage of a facility like this on campus to bring more conferences, more events, more activity with others onto the campus. Finally, our University of Maine Foundation had a record year this year with $43 million in donations coming in. Again, a tribute to the generosity and support of our donors and alums and University of Maine community. At UMaine Machias, they too have had a good opening. Couple of things I wanted to feature from UMaine Machias in our partnership and in our relationship. One thing that we're working at and that we're also working to do broadly across the system is to be sure that if there are University of Maine graduate students who could be of use in the University of Maine at Machias setting in ways that are beneficial mutually, both to UMM and to UMaine students, we're trying to make that happen. And we have 6 placed there until this semester, 2 grad students teaching in specialized graphic design, 2 co-teaching in science-focused courses. And I would add here, and William Otto can tell you more about this on breaks, but we have this Coastal Year program where UMaine students are made aware of University of Maine at Machias as a place where they might wish to spend their first year or longer if they enjoy it on the topic of coastal related science. And so we have 15 new students and 2 who are staying on from last year because they liked UMaine Machias. So that's a wonderful collaboration as a part of our partnership. 1 grad student facilitating career services at UMM in collaboration with the University of Maine Career Center. And then finally, a graduate student doing data analysis for the Family Futures Down East program, which is a wonderful multi-generational program at UMaine Machias. And we think perhaps the enrollment this year is the largest we have had to enable people with families to complete their college degrees and move into the workforce. So lots happening both places.
Great, thank you. President Hadeen.
Well, hello, everyone. We are very energized by a very successful homecoming weekend at UMFK. It started off with a pep rally, a well-attended pep rally on Thursday night, moved into a Friday reception, into Saturday, 2 successful wins for our men and women soccer teams against Fisher College. Also, the theme of homecoming was Year of the Bengals off of the calendar, the Japanese calendar piece. So Year of the Bengals, very exciting. Then we had Hall of Fame evening, which we recognized 4 inductees, and then into Sunday's alumni brunch to recognize and honor the Outstanding Alumni Award recipient. We also have had 2 incredibly generous gifts given to us recently by the Simon family, $300,000 gift to light our soccer field, which will be named the Michael Simon Soccer Field. In addition, they contributed additional funds to the scholarship, the Simon Scholarship Fund, to increase that to 300,000 as well. And then in closing, our First Mile Brewery has introduced the Bengal Brew and was an incredible hit during homecoming weekend. So go Bengals.
I'm a little concerned that two of you are talking about breweries, but. And last but not least, University of Maine Farmington, Joe McGowan.
Thank you. So our new graduate program in counseling has just received permission for its graduates to have a pathway to licensure. This was a new program that we had not yet received accreditation for, so there was some doubt about whether or not they would have this pathway. So now that we have it, it will allow us to expand this program. We'll begin not only a full-time program, but a part-time program. The second item that I'd like to report on is that our alpine ski racing coach, Andrew Willihan, has been named the USCSA 2022 Coach of the Year. So that's the league in which we play. And so it speaks to the strength of our alpine ski team. And then finally, I would like to point out that the university has received a 4.5 out of 5 stars for the Campus Pride Index for our LGBTQ friendliness on campus. And so we have been working on DEI initiatives. We have now hired 3 DEI employees working in this area. And so we are strengthening and being recognized for this effort. So thank you.
Thank you all very much. Anybody have any burning questions? Okay, we will. These are really helpful. Thank you. It's also a nice way to start a meeting when we have to grapple with so many different issues. But thank you very much. Let me turn to tab 3. I know there's been considerable interest about the proposed resolution regarding the chancellor's contract. I want to make clear that the provisions of the chancellor's contract, while made public, are a personnel matter, and that we take this responsibility seriously. We're working closely with the chancellor, and I can assure you work is aggressively underway by the chancellor to meet each of them. I did want to talk a little bit about this proposal. And I want to remind everyone that as we look at the chancellor's performance again this year, input will be solicited from the same people who provided it last year. So there will be an opportunity as we assess the chancellor's success in meeting these terms for input. And I would remind you that a year comes very quickly. The July 1 date means that we have to have probably by the May meeting or perhaps a special June meeting, our assessment done. So time matters. That's why the issue of coaching required speed. Obviously, if we found a coach who's available in January, that gives very little opportunity. So what we did was a series of networking discussions. We looked, there's a very robust pre-approved list of consultants that the university system has that allows for expedited contracting. We found a very qualified individual who was interested. The chancellor and the individual spoke. It looked like it was a very strong proposal. In discussions and negotiations, it became clear that the cost was prohibitive. We feel very, very deeply about the importance of our budget and spending wisely. And while this is an important initiative, the cost and the timing became excessive, and we thought inappropriate at this point. That required us to think about next steps. And the next step was the list we had gone through was there were no one who really met the test that we needed, the qualifications that we needed. To go out to RFP would delay the process considerably. And we recommended, therefore, that this condition be eliminated. Subsequently, and I can assure you, we have been on the phone and trying to find ways to get the chancellor some support and a sounding board. And subsequently, just this weekend, we have made a commitment from an individual with deep qualifications in public and private education, who's just, I think, very, very strong. And we're very pleased that we think we're going to be able to negotiate an affordable, appropriate option. But we need a little bit more time to do that. So we look forward to making this announcement. We're not quite ready to do it, but we feel confident. And again, it was one of those late breaking opportunities that I think will serve us well. But with that, our decision is to withdraw this resolution at this time. Any objections? I think we have consensus on that. Any comments, questions? And the chancellor and I will be meeting soon with that individual, and hopefully we can make an announcement very quickly. So, Professor Leduc.
Yes, on behalf of faculty, I'd just like to thank you for the transparency. I know this is a difficult and awkward situation, and it is, as we've spoke about before, it's balancing the personnel confidential issues as well as public facing accountability. So we really appreciate you being transparent and sharing the details. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Okay, with that, I think my report is concluded, and I'm very pleased to turn it over to the chancellor.
Good morning. Good morning, everyone. Wonderful to be with you. I want to touch on a few things as well as the one that's on the agenda. It has been 2 months since we last got together. Prior to that meeting, I was given specific directions on additional work that the trustees would like to see be done. During that period of time, I have visited each campus and spent time with each of the presidents on their campus prior to the start of school. I've already begun and have met with and been in touch with our newest 2 presidents on a regular basis, both on the phone and in person as well. And I've enjoyed that interface greatly. I've already started the fall visits, which have a different format than that which has been exercised previously. So this is my second trip to Presque Isle this week, as well as my visit to Fort Kent, where I was able to participate in the reception in honor of the president, who really never had the appropriate introduction to campus and the opportunity to bring in alumni and friends. And so I was happy to participate in that, as well as see the alumni soccer game, or at least a portion of the alumni soccer game as well. And of course, we're here in Presque Isle, and there is a small clip of me dancing, which I can assure you no one in Connecticut would believe actually transpired. But if you get to see it, I have to share this with you. Carolyn Dorsey and the president were part of a lip sync team that performed a song. And just to share Raymond's comment about a deceased singing star, an actress, that was the person who he had on his wall in his freshman year in college. The picture he received this time also included Travolta, but I think he has already cut that person out of the picture. I do want to end again, those visits will be down not this week, but next week at both Southern Maine and the law school, and we'll continue. We move those up quickly to try to get as much of that work done prior to the next visit, which is straining everyone's work requirements on their campuses. And many other things, including the change in the format to communications on Sundays, as well as asking the vice chancellors to share more information on an ongoing basis with each of you. I have heard congratulations on that. I've also heard that perhaps we're overworking you. You get the right to choose what to read, but we need to communicate was my direction, and so we will do that. I do want to take just one moment of additional time. Steve Richards is an absolutely fabulous man who has done great work on behalf of this institution. But even wonderful and great people sometimes get the details wrong. And so I've been asked to clarify that. The monies that are being taken up on the agenda later today are actually Alfond funded projects. And the Alfond foundation gets to decide where they want to give their money. That's not a decision we get to make. And I will also point out that this university has received an allotment of $3.4 million for capital expenditures, and we await the plan on how those monies would be spent, although $662,000 has already been committed to the cost overruns of a current project that's under construction. So there is a flow of dollars to each of our universities from the state dollars. Obviously, each of our universities has the possibility and quite frankly, the obligation to raise money through philanthropy as well as other appropriate endeavors. But we also plan on working with the community with this community to make sure that they spend their monies wisely. And we look forward to that work continuing. I happen to like soccer, I just want to say. Coached it when my three sons were under the age of 10, each of them, and then they decided to devote themselves to hockey for the rest of their lives. So, those are some of the things that I wanted to touch upon. The chair and I, and the vice chair for that matter, are in fairly constant contact as has been referenced. But I have been asked by the chair to introduce Jeff St. John, who will be speaking to the issues of unified accreditation and unified catalog. But the chair has also asked me to spend a little time with you today to really try to help explain what the significance of unified accreditation is. And so I will do that. Doesn't mean everyone will agree with me on the eventual product delivery, but by way of informing those of you who are newer to the board and did not go through the process 4 years ago of authorizing me to do a study in keeping with work that had previously been done by the Board of Trustees, which led to a decision to move forward on seeking unified accreditation with our accreditor, NECI. My predecessor had been in regular contact with NECI regarding their concerns about the ability of all of our universities to meet all of the standards separately that they require for accreditation of an educational institution of higher learning in the New England region, which they were then the sole provider of. Since that time, there is the possibility of additional or other accreditations taking place, and this is the primary accreditation, which allows us to access federal dollars. Kind of important. And those federal dollars, including scholarship, some scholarship dollars, but also the financing that families do to pay for their children's education. That was a very great concern and also was being delivered on the heels of a number of universities and colleges closing quite rapidly and to the distress of the communities in which they were located, as well as the students whose careers potentially were being impacted. We did move forward with the concept of unified accreditation, so as to say it, previously, each of our universities was accredited on their own and had the obligation to meet all standards. Under unified accreditation, every university is accredited, but it is under the systems accreditation by which they operate. So we and by further explanation, the visit that NECI will make and Jeff St. John will address shortly is specifically not the question of whether we will be unified accredited. We already are. It is in keeping with the normal calendar of visits by NECI to universities on a 10-year cycle with a required 5-year update after that major visit. That's the process that you're involved in and want to have some information about, and we'll be sharing that, and Jeff will be up in just a few minutes. But having said that, frequently we're asked, well, what does unified accreditation allow us to do that we might not otherwise be in a position to do? Well, again, I'll go back to NECI's primary concern, and that is, quite frankly, that some of our smaller universities in particular would not be able to be accredited on a freestanding basis because of the financial commitments required to meet all of those standards on an ongoing basis. We are the first separately accredited university system to go to a unified accreditation. Having said that, and trustees who have been here previously will know that we have both NECHI and ourselves have been reached by a number of state systems who are looking at this as a particular tool. I also remind everyone that we have universities sized from 600 students to just under 12,000 students. So there's great diversity, including this university, which is now topping serving the needs of 1,043 students, I think the last time I looked. However, I would also remind folks that 499 of those students are in the Your Pace program. So the size differential, particularly on traditionally supplied education, is quite different. Toward that end, we within the system leadership talk about unified accreditation as a tool that will allow us to make common and to do things that previously we might not have been able to do or didn't have the will to do. And that includes extensive work, which I think Robert will address perhaps later, about the ability of students who are on particularly smaller campuses to access programs that would only be available on larger campuses. But we're also talking about other sorts of things. For instance, a system-wide program in tourism, hospitality, and outdoor activities, where as a state, we're a leader. And in fact, as a state, are the 5th most dependent on tax revenue from those endeavors of all 50 states. And quite frankly, have a program and some great leadership at Southern Maine. We're about to have a hotel on our campus. The ability to bring that program to all of the universities is something that unified accreditation in a unified way would allow us to provide. That's just an example. Other examples that we do talk about is a number of our universities have eliminated foreign languages. And a number of our universities have foreign language programs. How do we make those programs more available to a larger number of students? Unified accreditation will allow us to do that as well and to fill a void. So for instance, if I'm studying business as an undergrad and wish to seek my MBA and wish eventually to work on a multinational basis or perhaps move to another continent, let us say Europe. The ability to access French and to become fluent in French would be a gigantic plus, for instance, or in South America or other parts of the world, Spanish, or in other parts of the world, Chinese, would all be very important. Yet on some of our campuses, we just can't afford to offer that as a freestanding department. That will be allowed under unified accreditation. Lots of work to be done, lots of faculty and department participation necessary to bring about some of these concepts. But it is, in essence, to make sure that we're all have accreditation, that we understand our obligations to our students are first, and that we have to put their needs and desires first if we want to be successful. And I think a unified accreditation is responsible potentially for breaking down so many of the barriers that currently exist between our institutions. And with that, and to be corrected by Jeff St. John, if I've said anything wrong, is Jeff St. John. Many of you know him. He is an individual who has is spearheading 2 important projects, which he'll speak to. One is unified accreditation as we look at our NECHI visit. Again, it's not to have a unified accreditation. It is just in furtherance of our current status as a unified accredited institution. And an additional job which he has accepted, and that is spearheading our effort to a unified catalog. Now, I'll let him explain it very quickly, but I want to say a unified catalog allows us to use our students, faculty, and staff to use the tool of unified accreditation. Jeff.
Chancellor, thank you. And I don't know how to make an accreditation update as stimulating as President Rice's love for Olivia Newton-John, but I'll do what I can. As the Chancellor noted, in a couple of weeks, we'll have a visit by a 10-member team appointed by our regional accreditor, NECHI. to come and visit all of our individual universities and our law school, and also hold a series of meetings as part of their primary evaluation based at the University of Maine on the Orono campus. Every NECHI evaluation visit is intended to be constructive. Every NECHI evaluation visit is intended to identify areas where the institution is already performing well and is encouraged to continue performing in those areas, and also areas where improvements are could be made and are so noted and we're encouraged to make those changes. And this is no different from any other visit. The focus of the team that visits us will not be on our model of accreditation, but rather on our fidelity to NECHI's 9 standards for accreditation, just as it would be anywhere else. So that's the approach they take, and that's what they'll be doing when they're with us. I think it's important for the trustees to know that between the individual campus visits, at least 1 or 2 members of the team will visit every one of our campuses on our law school. And again, there'll be a big primary schedule based in Orono. Cumulatively, members of the team will meet with over 70 groups of faculty, students, staff, university leaders, system leaders, and board leaders during their time with us. Some of those invitees to individual meetings are functional area specific. So they'll meet with our chief business officers, they'll meet with our enrollment managers, they'll meet with our presidents, they'll meet with our provosts, again, along with faculty, students, and staff in a number of contexts. Last December, we went to NECHI and said, we know that your normal practice is to schedule 1 open forum for faculty. That is not reasonable for us as a unified institution. We asked for and got 3 open forums for faculty. We also asked for and got a meeting for every faculty senate or assembly's executive committee as part of the individual campus visit. So just there are 11 total opportunities for faculty to speak with members of the team, in addition to individual faculty who've been invited to meetings addressing DEI, graduate programming, and other subject-specific areas. So we've done as much as we were able to do, and I think far beyond what is normally done to ensure broad, deep, wide, and diverse opportunities for faculty to participate, in addition to open forums for undergraduate and graduate students and an open forum for staff members on our campuses. Two of you asked, in fact, I've gotten this several times and twice just yesterday at the reception before dinner, and I'm happy to have built this into my update. Several people have asked, what happens after the visit? So after October 5th, when they leave, what from there? So at the last day of the visit, October 5th, the evaluation team chair, President Ross Gattell of Bryant University in Rhode Island, will deliver a verbal exit report. It'll last about 10 minutes, and we'll seem anticlimactic. There's no Q&A afterwards. He stands up and he delivers a summary of the team's findings. And while we'll be capturing his presentation by webinar, you'll also see people all over the room, if you attend in person, furiously scribbling down everything he says, because the substance of the chair's exit report typically forms the spine of the subsequent written report that the team will produce. So that's really a good indicator of where we are at that point. We'll be paying very close attention to what he has to say. The post-visit timeline, and I think this is important for the trustees to know, is as follows. The team chair, roughly 4 to 6 weeks after the visit, shares a written report with the team members and with NECHI staff who review it before the next step, which is for that report to be shared with the chancellor. The chancellor and his staff will review that report, but for factual accuracy only. We're not invited at that point to take issue with matters of interpretation, but just to check to make sure that what they're saying is factually consistent with who we are and what we do. Once final and once the report has been formally submitted, the chancellor will be invited to respond to the report on substantive grounds, on qualitative grounds. And usually that occurs in any one or more of 3 areas. The first is we can say we concur with the report. We find nothing wrong with this report. We agree with it. The second area is that we say we have a difference of interpretation on a specific point or points, and we so note that in essentially developing a polite counter argument to what the chair has put in the report, and we submit that. Thirdly, we can share an update about areas or areas where we discovered along with the team in the course of their visit or during the chair's exit report on campus that they think we need to make improvements, and it's become clear to us already that we need to make improvements. We can share an update about anything we're already doing at that point to make improvements in that area or areas. This is a very effective way to show earnest, to show good faith with the commission, with NECHI. And if we're in that position of being asked to make an improvement here or there, my recommendation to the chancellor and the presidents would be that we start that work right away and be prepared to build that into our written response. NECHI normally addresses comprehensive evaluations in the semester following the physical visit to the institution. So it's most likely that in March or April, spring of 2023, NECHI will invite the chancellor and President Gattel, the evaluation team chair, to a meeting of the commission at its headquarters in Wakefield, Massachusetts. And by the way, the chancellor is free to take staff members if he wishes to that meeting. I'm assuming he'll take Carolyn Dorsey with him, which I think is a good idea. And if he doesn't take me, I'm going to sit in my office and cry. So I hope I'm invited as well. In its review of our evaluation, the overall review by the commission, they look at 5 elements. The first is the self-study that we finalized and submitted in mid-June. The second is the team report that President Gattel prepares. The third is a confidential recommendation that the team chair shares directly with NECHI staff, and that's a standard component of these evaluations. It's nothing specific to us, but the NECHI always asks the chair, setting aside your report, what did you think? Tell us, and that's a direct communication between the chair and NECHI. The fourth element is our written response to the team's report. And then the fifth element is an area where I'm pleased to say we are in very good shape. The commission always takes into account any of what it terms adverse actions that are currently facing the institution under review. There are none for us. We're not on probation. There are no fiscal irregularities. We are not delinquent in any of our standard reporting to the commission. So we go into the evaluation and come out of the evaluation with a clean slate, and there's nothing they'll be looking at in terms of adverse action on our account. Following its meeting with the chancellor and with President Gattel, the commission will send the chancellor and Chair Riley a letter articulating its findings and outlining any areas it would like us to see work on over the next 1, 2, 3, or 5 years. That letter concludes the formal phase of the evaluation process when they receive that letter, most likely in May or June of 2023, following that meeting with the commission. As we work on areas for improvement, the commission might also ask us to follow up with a report a year later or 2 years later. This is also normal, non-negative in nature, or sometimes they'll follow up with what's called a focused evaluation, where they want to know more about one standard of accreditation or another that they're interested in based on their findings. Also not a negative thing, and something that we would welcome as a chance to improve what we do going forward. The next phase of my update is very brief with respect to the NECHI visit. It's just the 3 pieces that I said in my preparation for this meeting that I would talk about. Scheduling. I'm pleased to say that we've scheduled all the meetings that will be held on the individual campuses and on the main campus schedule in Orono. By Wednesday morning of this week, we will share a complete master schedule spreadsheet with the team chair and his executive assistant, and we'll all be literally on the same page from that point forward. Logistics. In addition to the individual campus visit schedules and the primary schedule, our logistics team has worked with President Gattel on individual schedules for each of his team members, which may sound exhaustive or crazy, but the point of that is that all those team members are assigned primary and secondary responsibilities to one or more of the NECHI standards. So we have to know where they are at all times and which meetings they're going to. And once we know who's been assigned to each standard as a primary and a secondary, we slot them into the meetings accordingly on the overall schedule. And then communications. We began issuing invitations to system-wide to faculty, administrators, students, and staff in mid-August to attend meetings as part of this process. And I would have to say that the response has been overwhelmingly positive to date. We did not ask for an RSVP because we're dealing with several hundred individual invitations to meetings, but we have a significant number of people who plan to drive from another campus to Orono for their 45-minute meeting or series of meetings with the visiting team because they recognize the importance of it for the system and for their individual universities. And the turnout has been very positive. I've said this to the presidents before, but I also want to ensure the trustees, we've made every effort to be as representative as possible in how we invite people to these meetings, seeking participation from all of our constituencies at all of our universities and our law school. In fact, once that master schedule goes forward on Wednesday, we'll be shipping it to the presidents to ask them, is there anybody who is, in your view, vital to this meeting on this topic who we should add at this time to the schedule? We're trying to avoid a situation where we have 40 of our people meeting with 2 people on the NECHI team. So we're trying to keep the sizes of the meetings reasonable, but we do want to make sure that every president has an opportunity to say, you left someone out and I want you to add this person. Chancellor shared his first system-wide message about the October visit on August 25th. Next message will go out on September 15. That message will then be repackaged by campus communications personnel and shared specifically with student groups, student leaders, student organizations to make sure that for the open forums for undergraduate and graduate students, in addition to student meetings scheduled as part of the individual campus visits, we have as strong participation as we can muster for those meetings. And then the chancellor will send a final message on September 29, reminding everyone of everything that's coming a couple of days later and encouraging everyone once again to participate. We've tried to be as open, consistent, transparent, and positive in this communication stream as we can. And of course, that's a stream that began well over a year ago when we began sharing drafts of the self-study all along the road toward its completion. Those are my updates about the NECHI visit, and I'd be happy to answer any questions that the trustees may have before moving on to an update about Unified Catalog.
Any questions for Vice Chancellor St. John?
I just am incredibly impressed with what is going on with regard to scheduling all this and organizing it all. What role does the Board of Trustees play? And are the leadership of the board involved in these meetings? I mean, do those of us who are new to the board need to expect any invitations or scheduling activities? What would you like us to do, I guess is my question.
So Trustee Alexander, as you know, we've invited all the board members to attend the kickoff dinner on the Sunday evening. That is not an official meeting on the schedule. It may be one of the more important meetings on the schedule, if you understand what I'm saying. We very much want a vibrant board and president turnout for that meeting. Vice chancellors will be there as well, the associate vice chancellors, some other senior system staff. Of course, the chancellor and the board chair will be at the head of the room with the chair of the evaluation team. That's an opportunity for the board to show its engagement, its commitment, its enthusiasm for this process. That's number one. Number two is a standard element of these visits is for typically the team chair and one other team member will meet with the chair, the vice chair, and the chairs of ASA and FFT Monday morning following the Sunday night dinner. And that's a chance to check in directly with board leadership, ask questions, invite comments from them, get their perspective on all things UMS. Those are the two key roles that the board plays in this process.
Any other questions for Jeff? Okay, let's talk catalog. Oh, sorry. I'm sorry.
On behalf of the faculty, we just wanted to say our appreciation that that you've created so many opportunities. That was a worry of ours with so many campuses. And although it is happening, I guess we can thank COVID for Zoom abilities that we don't all have to travel to Orono if it doesn't work with our teaching schedule. But I'm old enough to remember a NECHI visit just on this campus. And I was like, how are you going to manage that for all the campuses? But kudos on doing such a job to engage faculty in many different ways. Thank you.
Thank you. And then Unified Catalog, 3 quick updates for you today. And by the way, for the new trustees in particular, I hope this is helpful. The Unified Catalog project is not a lumping or merging together of the individual university catalogs. They remain distinct and they will remain distinct, but it is a behind the scenes with the help of our IT folks, ultimately a drawing down of walls that currently divide data from one university's information system to another. And then relatedly on the Unified Catalog side of things, a whole series of barriers that have been identified by faculty and by many other people over the years that Carolyn Dorsey, Rosa Redonant, and I, and many other people have been working on for a period of time now, trying to eliminate those barriers in and around course registration, transfer activities, other things that Robert's office and many others have been working on for a time now. We're trying to do that work more strategically and in a more coordinated way at the chancellor's direction and with his guidance and leadership. And we've already seen some return on that, and we look forward to more in the future. With that as a backdrop, then first, I reported this to you last spring that we're trying, I'll keep this very brief. There's a form. Please don't fall asleep. It's called the Study Away form. It's a central facet to course registration and a central component of transfer activity. It's used for students who want to take one class anywhere else in the system or anywhere else domestically other than their matriculated home institution and bring those credits back. Or the same for a student who wants to take a course internationally and bring those credits back. Right now, we have 7 different forms on the undergraduate side and 3 different forms on the graduate side, and a different process for everyone. We've been working with the support of the Faculty Senate and Assembly leaderships and with the provosts since June, about 35 people, campus system-wide and professional and classified staff, and 2 IT professionals assigned to this task to create one undergraduate form for domestic form for the Study Away process, and move it from paper, where it's been since its inception, to an online format, and the same one form for international Study Away, and move that from paper to online. And your campus professional staff have been incredible about coming together, trying to unify, trying to coordinate, create a form that is more student friendly while still honoring faculty authority, the faculty signature chain, the administrative signature chain for all these processes on the respective campuses. We will submit a draft to the Faculty Senate and Assembly presidents, the Faculty Governance Council, and the provosts at the end of September. Here's where we are, here's where we're headed. We anticipate having completing this process. Our goal is November. And as soon as it's been vetted by everyone, we work out the bugs, we get the online system going. By fall of 2023, we'll have a radically improved process for a significant slice of course registration and transfer activity across the system. And it's all the president's staff, the people on the campuses who've made this work happen. So I'm pleased to share that update. Secondly, and relatedly, after meeting with the MGI leadership and cybersecurity faculty last spring, both of whom recommended ardently the need for a one-stop resource website for faculty who are involved in multi-university programs or would like to be, or who jointly teach a course with a colleague on another campus or would like to. We are putting that together right now, and by the end of September, we will go live with that site. We'll push it out to faculty system-wide and explicitly invite for their feedback. We know we will have left things out, but you could thank our MGI and cybersecurity faculty for the fact that this website will be up, and we think it will be a significant tool, not only for faculty, but it will improve the experience for students in multi-university programs. And as the chancellor alluded earlier, one of the benefits of unified accreditation is to be able to deliver these programs in a coordinated, seamless way while meeting the requirements of our accreditor in doing so. And then my final update today is that under the broader heading of transfer activity, I had several productive conversations with Robert and the provosts over the summer, with a number of people who the provosts asked me to speak to on their staffs or on their campuses. We've identified several potential new unified catalog initiatives that we'd like to work on in the coming year. I've scheduled meetings. I'm down to one left to do, but between Wednesday of this week and the end of November, I will meet in person or by Zoom with every faculty senate or assembly and the law school faculty again this fall semester to talk about those potential new initiatives and to seek faculty consultation, coordination, and help in making some of these possible. And again, we're working off a longstanding list of barriers that faculty, students, registrars, and others have identified that the advent of unified accreditation helps make possible the removal of those barriers. We're trying to do that as systematically, as quickly, and in as student-friendly a way as we can. And with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions you have about the unified catalog.
Trustee Cates.
Thank you. And Jeff, thanks for that presentation. Please don't get sick between now and October. This really isn't about the catalog, but and thank you, Chancellor, for your explanation about unified accreditation as a tool. Just a couple of nuts and bolts questions, though. To use as example, an UMPI student takes a course in Chinese from USM. Where does the head count credit go? Where does the tuition dollars go?
So I'm going to very politely punt to my colleague, Robert Placido, who works on that question every day and probably has something he would want to say about it.
So I'll take a whack at that one too, since we've worked on it together. Every student will have a home. That's that's the university that you were admitted to or continue to be registered with. So the idea is that even if you have a home, you can take a course at another campus and have it count towards your requirements for graduation. So that's if you think of everybody having to have a home, that's the concept. And when you graduate, it won't say you took your diploma won't say you took all but one course at this university and one at that course. They'll be treated the same because we can do that. All right, so everyone has a home. I think is an important concept to have, and that home is the degree granting institution in our constellation of universities operating under unified accreditation. It gets difficult to understand, but if you repeat it often enough, you get used to it. I think that's part of the answer. I think another part of the answer, and I'm certainly happy to have Robert participate in this quick discussion. We are in the process of working out the finances. How will those dollars be split? So far, we have brought forward to several committees that are necessary for input on this to look at a 50-50 division as a potential starting point. I will tell you as trustees that I am also working on a concept, at least for the first 2 or 3 years, where we really step into this in a larger way than we have because of the process that you have to go through currently on those paper forms, that we might offset some of the loss to some of the smaller community, some of our smaller universities as we get this system underway, and give us some time to make a permanent decision collectively on how that split would look in the future. But underlying our basic start concept is it should be a shared division of dollars, and the home university would count the student as we measure the size of our populations as well, because I thought that might be a follow-up question.
Sorry, just quickly. But the credit hours for that course get credited to which campus? Robert?
It gets credited to whoever teaches the course.
And the other question I have quickly is, so there's a student at UMPI who presumably is going to get a University of Maine Presque Isle degree. How many of their total credits can they take somewhere else before they are no longer a student of University of Maine and Presque Isle?
So we still,
Go ahead. What we do have requirements with respect to residency. Go
yeah,
ahead.
that's all I was going to say. So, and it depends on the program and the university, but we still will have to have that as a part of our accreditation. So the home campus, you will have to take a minimum number. Do you know what it is for Jeff?
It's typically 30.
30. Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much.
If I could follow up, I think another important question is, what tuition rate does a student pay? Because if it's an UMPI student taking an Orono course, that's a lot more expensive than an UMPI course. So that's a question that students already always ask. And I'll tell you, I've had students, thank God you're getting rid of that study away form. I think ours is still a mimeograph photocopy, like it wasn't even generated digitally. Yeah. But students, it was such a hassle to go through that. They're like, I'm just going to enroll through even though it's costing me twice the much per credit hour. So that's another issue of how much is the cost for students.
We understand that to be a question that has not yet been resolved, nor is there a proposal on how to resolve it yet, but it is a question that's being worked on actively. Robert?
So the answer is it depends. So if the student goes out on their own, because sometimes they do, and they just go to one of the other institutions, they apply, they take a course, they will pay the rate at the course. Sometimes we're not even aware that that's happening until they transfer the credits back. So that's one answer. We do have currently a process. If you plan to share a course, so that means you've made arrangements that the books are going to be at your bookstore, that the course is going to be in each other's catalog, that the faculty are working together. I mean, that kind of planning, just like you do your own courses. We have a process where that course can be added at your institution, from it's being taught by someone else. And then the students will pay the local rate. They will see it on their bill as a local course. All of the financial aid, if they're a veteran, their benefits aren't impacted. So if we go through that process, and I was having conversations with some of the new presidents on this, that it's confusing. If you're talking about one-off, that's a whole different thing. We can't do one-offs on every single variability if a student just wants to take a course. But if you know in advance that there is demand for a course and you can't offer it at your campus, partner with an institution, we get it added to your catalog, and then all of those underlying things are automated.
So Robert, could you so if I'm a university with a higher tuition, what incentive would I have then to collaborate if I get less tuition revenue?
So when we piloted this, and by the way, this was one of the first things that the board asked me to do 4 years ago. And so with Joe's help and the leaders at Machias, we piloted a course that Joe was sharing, was being taught by Machias, and Joe's aviation program needed it. And so they were already doing a manual process, and we went ahead and created this automated process. So the course, as I recall, was low enrolled at Machias, 12 students a semester or something like that. But Joe had students who needed the course. So you've got a professor who's already teaching, right?
Yep.
So
Yep.
so now Joe could, as a president or at the time provost, could have said, well, I'm just going to buy my own faculty member at full-time rate for one course that he needs for the student. He could have done that, but he recognized that, well, I'll just give up those few credit hours to Machias because they have the expertise. Machias is already teaching the class, and now that class, when we were running that particular class, there's that story gets long, but the class was full every semester. And so now you've got a faculty member that's fully engaged with the full class.
Let me also add that we have a lot of experience with differential payments within universities. And the biggest example of that is early college. And yes, some early college courses are taught by faculty at the high school, but we also have a large number of students who attend our universities on early college. And so this is not something that's new to us with respect to working through. We are taking the time to build consensus around what the ultimate solutions are, but we have a lot of experience.
So I'll add to the story just a little bit longer on that particular example. So you have a group of students being taught at Machias locally. Then we're adding students from UMA into that class. It's online, so that's a component of this. So now the faculty member is teaching 30 students. Initially, to incentivize people to develop courses and share their course, we shared 100% of that tuition. The thinking is, A, we needed people to participate in the teaching side, and B, really, in this case, UMA, they get 120 credit hours for that student. So they're giving up 3 and not having to buy a full-time faculty member. That's a good deal without giving them any of that tuition for that single course. But we've gotten to the point now, and we have 50 or 60 of these examples around the system right now where they're sharing courses. and that revenue is being split. We have put forth a proposal that we modify that now to a 50% split. It's time, I think, and then there's a bit of skin in the game for both institutions to participate. And we've had agreement with the presidents and the provosts. Of course, it was during the summer. We haven't made any decisions until we could talk to faculty now that they're back. And we met with the CBOs last week on that proposal. The last thing I would say on this is, it depends. We want to put up a framework for all of these processes to work, but we don't want to box people in from innovating outside of that. And so when proposals come forward to you and they're collaborative in nature, we're encouraging people to not just think you have to do it 50-50, you have to share the courses this way. Because there might be an example where, say, two institutions want to create the cyber between UMA and USM. And one thing they could have done is maybe USM would spend much more of their money on marketing. Maybe that would be an upfront agreement. So maybe they would get more of the revenue in the agreement. So what we want to see is a full prospectus and methodically thought out in some way. And we have lots of different examples. So the other reason that's always going to be variable is, for years we've had traditional models of collaboration where, say, a student starts at Fort Kent for 2 years and then goes on to finish their 4-year degree at USM. So it's sort of a cut point. There's not that complicated sharing and management. They just move over to their other institution and finish. So we've had those kinds of articulation agreements for years, and then there is no need for complicated revenue sharing. You just keep the revenue you have at the time and so forth. So trying not to take anything off the table so that we can be as innovative as possible.
Trustee Misha, then Trustee Cates.
The question I have is, how do you deal with the rural centers? Holton, East Millinocket, Dover. So if the head count is going to the campus itself, when you look at how do you justify these rural centers, they usually look at the head count. But if the head count's not there, how do you take that into consideration? And funding, is the funding for the rural centers based upon enrollment? And if so, how's that attributed?
So funding issues are an issue for the trustees. We can make recommendations, but ultimately the trustees decide what to fund and what not to fund. Again, I'll go back to what I said earlier. Every student will have a home. So if it's an Augusta center, presumably that student is enrolled in Augusta, although from time to time, and we have a number of centers that are cooperative ventures. So not everybody has the same home who may be participating in a center. They may have a different home university. So interchangeable usage. So I think as programs grow, there may be reasons to have additional rules. What we're trying to do is get it rolling. And I think what we're trying to explain is the early work that's being done, the importance of unified catalog and furtherance of this endeavor, because it's very difficult for faculty and students to understand what is available. I mean, there are students who will sit down and do hours of research to find what they need. There are students who will blow it off after 5 minutes. So there's a lot of work to be done. What we thought we wanted, and I think we've actually probably accomplished it, is giving you a better idea of what unified accreditation is and its importance, particularly to our smaller universities.
Just a quick observation of one, I've learned how this is more complex than I thought. But secondly, I think it's just the great fear of the unknown. And to the extent that at least the general rules can get established and out there so that everybody knows what they are, and particularly the fear that some of the smaller campuses might have in particular are settled. So people will know how the money is going to get carved up and how the credit hours are going to get credited. The sooner the better. But thanks.
Sure. Anything else? Okay. Oh, sorry,
Thank you. I just want to say, I just keep coming back, and I think for all of us, coming back to what the chancellor said at the beginning about how unified accreditation is one tool in the toolbox, because I think it exposes a lot of questions, but it doesn't change the challenge of the conversation happening about enrollment, or the conversations happening about how we meet the economic needs of the state, how we handle state appropriations, right? I think it just, for me, that's what from the minute I got on the board, the first thing I did was read the unified accreditation report. And there's a lot in there, but we have to think about it as one tool in the toolbox. And I think that is, for me, this conversation is an example of that, because some of these challenges we're talking about intersect directly with the challenges we're talking about with enrollment, the challenges we're talking about with budget, and the obligation and opportunity we have as a system to continue to meet the needs of the state from a workforce, education, and economic perspective.
No, I really appreciate that. I think there were attempts in the past, long before I got here, that there would be a single solution to a problem. And it became painfully evident to me in preparation to take this job that was an unreasonable approach. That there was no way that we could design a fix for everything at once, that it had to be a process. And that's what we've been working diligently on, at the same time that we had to take on things like the implementation of a new form of accreditation. I'll remind you that, again, that was NECHI's idea along with the universities, but we're not talking, we're talking about one system working together with each of its universities in that constellation. And that's a very different approach than had been spoken about in the past. And it allows us potentially to secure a brighter future for all of our universities, with an emphasis and I think support for the maintenance of our legislative mandate to maintain universities, but to do so in a way that doesn't hurt other universities within that constellation of universities operating under the accreditation of the system.
Anybody else? Okay, well, accreditation, I guess, is sort of the gold seal that also tells us that this is an institution of quality, that each of the universities made the grade, and it's really an important undertaking. So we deeply appreciate all the work you've put into it, Jeff, and your team. Thank you. And now. Go ahead.
The only thing, Robert, just one second. Again, I wanted to clarify. What's it? Yeah, I'll touch. There were a couple of other things, Robert. Just give me no, stay there. Stretch your legs. A couple of other things. An outstanding opening, I should tell you, of each of our universities, and I've had the opportunity to visit a number of them in the days leading up to or during that opening, and each of the presidents and their staff, faculties, field maintenance folks have done an outstanding job. So I do want to thank and recognize everyone for that. Secondly, I also want to touch on COVID. As you know, we have changed our approach to COVID in keeping with what really is going on nationally, although tonight at 7 p.m. I'm getting my flu shot and my next booster. I have an appointment for that down in Bangor. We are requiring people be fully vaccinated. And that's a standard that is described by the federal government to mean the initial one shot if it was a one shot, or the two shots if it was a two shot. We did raise or lift certain standards with respect to masking and the like, again, in complete compliance with what is the recommendations of the federal government. So that goes well. I urge everyone who's eligible to get one of the new boosters to get it, but you'll make your own personal decision. I would also say to you that we are tracking enrollment on a daily basis leading into our census. in October. We will examine that more fully once we reach that time. You know, in the immediate days before opening, numbers get higher, and not surprisingly, in the 2 or 3 or 4 weeks after opening, we lose some of our students to a melt. It just wasn't the right choice. It wasn't the right thing. When we have that data, we will share that data with you. We have remained fairly constant in our predictions with respect to the number of students that we made from basically April on. We saw that pattern continue. It is not as bright as we would like. On the other hand, as I've referred to the incoming traditional freshman class, this is a class who's had their education interrupted more than any other student body since the Second World War. I think there's fatigue within that population, and we're tracking that. We did exceptionally well in the first 2 years of the COVID experience, far outpacing on a retention and admissions basis, at least the average. Remember, there's 1.5 million fewer students in college and university today than were in the fall of 2019. We're dealing with a little more fatigue, I think, in Maine, as well as the competition that a $12 an hour job going to $22 an hour has caused, particularly with our male population. Those are just 2 points I wanted to make to the trustees. More to come, and more slicing and dicing of those numbers once we have our census numbers.
Robert, now that you've stretched your legs, all of us would like to do the same. So with your permission, can we take a 5-minute break, but literally 5 minutes? I think that gets us back here a little bit after 10. Trust me. I mean, Could we reconvene, everybody? Hello, breaks are dangerous things. Could everybody come back to their seats? We are running a bit late and we want to get back on schedule.
Okay.
We're going to start to name names if people. Wonderful. Vice Chancellor Placido, thank you so much for suggesting to us that we take a break.
And thank you. Before I start, I do want to thank you all personally for, it's a small tactical change on your part, but it is very meaningful to myself and I hope my colleagues. It's so wonderful to see Professor Leduc sitting with you all closely, but also our colleagues at tables and students at tables around us too. Yesterday, we had one of our professors remark that the word cloud looked like a target. He's from Homeland Security, so it's sort of a Freudian thing, I think. So I don't know what this says about me, but I love the shape of these tables in that they are in the shape of an arrow, tip of the spear, if you will. And that is rightly so because all the meaningful work is done by our students and faculty. So thank you for that. Thanks. So the system was formed in 1968. We've had decades to think about what a system is. Yet, hundreds of my colleagues, higher ed leaders from across the country, still ponder the question of what is systemness. And I think a few of us have even said that a time or two. Systems are not unique to Maine, for sure. The university systems in our country educate 75% of public four-year students. So they're a quite common occurrence and they've been around for a long time. We belong to a National Association of System Heads, kind of a funny title, and they've kicked off a new initiative this year called the Power of Systems. And I encourage you to go to their website. It's at powerofsystems.org if you want to look at that. The organization has many members from across the country, collaborating to improve outcomes for our systems and ultimately our students. We meet to share best practices and frankly, just learn from each other. I can tell you that my experience working with the group has shown me that the University of Maine system has accomplished more than most. Might surprise you. I can't speak for the first 40 years, looking back at our history of what was done. I can imagine it was quite a change back then. But much of our development has happened within the last 10 years. I think a remarkable amount of movement and a great deal of that was initiated by board members who still serve with us today. And it was great to have Tim here earlier. So we'll continue to aggressively push forward, obviously, but I wanted to remind you to feel good about what you have accomplished for us and with us. We have unified in the last 10 years our IT operations, government relations, academic calendars, HR, procurement, facilities, emergency management, labor relations, legal counsel, and many more operations. And I make this point today because we talk about being a system, we talk about using resources effectively and how we can collaborate together. But all of those changes have already occurred. Many, the envy of my system partners, because they would love to be able to have a finance system that is unified. I can tell you most are completely disparate in that where a lot of the collaboration breaks down for them. So I'm here this morning to actually give you an update on the progress related to unified accreditation. I'll call it UA from now on. But I wanted to start by making that point that this journey, we're not starting from scratch. Much of what I mentioned, though, about being unified is administrative in nature. Certainly, the more significant change in our UA approach is with our academic programs. That's where the real difference will come in. But even academics We have collaborated for years. We were talking about this earlier, so I won't go too much more into that. But we've had collaborative models between our institutions, dating back probably before the systems were even formed. So, and most of those processes were manual, and that's why we're looking for that next level of innovation where all of this could be more seamless. And when it comes to faculty research, faculty rarely publish by themselves. Collaboration has always been key when it comes to that. So there, while we talk about change and resistance and fear, there has always been an underpinning of collaboration and a desire to work together in this system, particularly. So it's always the devil's in the details, though, right? But again, I acknowledge that when we talk about UA and the opportunities that is brought to us, we are really talking about that next level. We have been thinking about this. Of course, we were all dealt a mighty blow with COVID. It didn't stop us, but it did slow us down. We had to deal with lots of issues. Of course, it was a learning moment for us all too. But directly after we received word from NECHI to be approved to operate in a unified accredited environment, the chancellor asked all of his leaders to review our processes, to update our way of thinking about everything to take advantage of UA. He understood that many of our policies and procedures would need to be changed. So this is a matter of what brick needs to go down first. We know we can see the vision, we can see all the wonderful advantages of this, but higher ed institutions are complex in nature, and so we have to start with a good solid foundation. He acknowledged early on that we needed a better way to engage and communicate with faculty before we could change any of this. So the first thing that he did was convene the faculty senate leaders and ask them for their ideas to come up with a solution to do just that. They recommended to him that the Faculty Governance Council be formed. The group has been meeting for, I think, close to 2 years now. Is that right, Carolyn? They are self-led. They have reinvented themselves a number of times. They don't always agree themselves on issues or even their charter, which is all very healthy and exciting to me because they are coming up with something that doesn't exist in the rest of the country. So another point I'm bringing up the systemness, while that is widespread, operating as a unified accredited environment in the way that we are conceiving together is completely innovative. So as Professor Leduc reminded us last night, that this is even more complicated because we're making all these changes as we're flying the plane. So, great that we have the Faculty Governance Council. There's still lots of work to do there, but the first major UA accomplishment with the Faculty Governance Council's help, the presidents and the provosts in the system, was to develop a new framework for considering changes to our academic program portfolio. I'll walk you through that process today up on the screen. What I hope you take away from this is how inclusive, methodical, thoughtful we are, and that we are doing this all together. So it was 4 years ago or so, and Jim Irwin posed a very similar question to our trustee did at ASA. Barbara brought up how, when we bring a program forward, a new program forward, how do we as board members know that this is being considered in this new unified way? If I'm paraphrasing, but I think that's okay. So let me walk you through. This was very difficult. We started with I think the most meaningful procedure that will help us with this. So Heather, if you'll go to, so if you want to follow along on your computers, it's maine.edu. We're going to data and policies, and then down to administrative practice letters, about 3 down there, Heather. Here you go. And incidentally, all of our procedures, so we really distinguish these two things now. The board has policies and they're located under your board tier. And we have internal procedures that management executes on your policies. We have consolidated all of that. That was as part of the chancellor's effort to get all of this in one place. So now they're in a tidy, organized a webpage for you here, so you can review these at any time. So if we'll scroll down, you'll see academic affairs has a section there. And we're going to go down to the P area for programs. We've got that all categorized there for you. We'll go into academic program approval. So let's just scroll down to the images. This is something new that many of these programs are complicated. So let's go down to the second image that you can find there. Heather, thank you so much. So you can see that if you were just to read about this, it would be a very complicated set of dialogue. So we provided these visual images of what happens when we're considering a program. Whoops, that's okay. So there are two phases in this process. We added the first phase to alleviate the conflicts that were occurring. So we have an intent to plan phase, and then we have a full proposal phase. So a group of faculty from across institutions or faculty within a single institution can come up with an idea for a new program before they commit lots of resources, time, and become emotionally kind of connected to that idea. We ask that they submit basically an elevator speech. It's a one-page document outlining the idea. That intent to plan that you can see step one there at the top left corner of the flow here. They submit that, and the participating provosts, of course, are involved in that. And we notify the Faculty Governance Council of that intent to plan as well, so they can have a chance to consider it. The proposal comes up to the CAOC, which is our acronym for the provosts, the chief academic leaders on each campus. And we talk about it. So we talk about how it will impact existing programs. We talk about the potential, the market, the resources needed. And when we talk about resources, we share if one university has resources that are under workload, then we can maybe perhaps share them into this new endeavor. And all of those conversations happen in an initial sort of phase. Again, the intent of this first step isn't to create a barrier, but it is to prevent when an idea comes forward that's not such a good idea for the rest of the provosts, that we cut it short early and not spend a lot of time on it, or we give meaningful feedback to the groups who are in the development to say, consider these things when you bring us your proposal forward. Does that make sense? Okay, so then we go on to step two, which is the blue box there, and it's a full program proposal. So if the intent to plan is passed or it has feedback, it would go back to the people involved. And then they would create, and we have that outlined in this document of what a full program proposal includes, but it is everything. It is how the markets are aligned, what resources are needed, what the potential enrollments are. It is a full business prospectus, if you will. And that takes a long time to complete, and sometimes expensive with external sort of reviewers and that kind of thing, if necessary. So the proposals you can see there, and this flow chart would be much more complicated if we included the local university processes. Part of the reason that this APL is so important is that it honors 100 years of academic tradition. So academics create academic programs. They create the curriculum, they create the ideas, they work together transparently with their colleagues on the campuses, and those processes are all unique at each campus. So Orno, for example, has processes that go up through chairs and deans and through senates and through multiple rounds of provost cabinets and those kinds of things. Whereas Presque Isle might just have a faculty body that does a review, and most of the colleagues know each other and they just informally meet. So we don't dictate how the local campus operates their process, but we ensure that the local process happens. So that proposal will then come back up. You can see in step 3, comes back up to me. I do an initial review, and then it goes back out to all of these groups. It goes to the Faculty Governance Council. Note that the Faculty Governance Council, an expectation that we have that I believe has been agreed on is that they bring these proposals back to their campuses to have thoughtful discussions with their senates to make sure that everyone is seeing this before any action is taken. Faculty Governance Council will bring those recommendations or comments back to us. The provosts then meet with me. We go around and again review all of the concerns, talk about how things can fit together, or if they need to fit together. We had a recent proposal, and this is where the question came from University of Maine proposing their food science degree, which we'll vote on later. Food science, we had all of these discussions. Food science, in the way that they have developed this, is something very unique to UM. There weren't opportunities to spread that out that we could obviously see. And so there's still opportunity for universities to operate in a unique way to fulfill their mission without having to be forced to collaborate in every single environment. But the conversations certainly did happen. And even that proposal I was really inspired by, because we think about collaborating across institutions. Provosts like Provost Volan thinks about collaborating across divisions of his own university, and sometimes that's difficult. So this proposal is using resources across various fields at University of Maine to create a new program without additional resources, and leveraging the resources that he has and expertise of faculty. So the provosts then give their recommendation to me, and then I consider all of the comments that come back. And you'll notice that very specific on the things that my actions there, that I could, if I felt like there were still some unresolved issues, I could go back up to the President's Council. That's what PC means. Or I could revise, provide my own comments, reject. Or I could then recommend approval, and then the chancellor would do a final review of it, and then ultimately recommend to you all for final approval. And you can see that I talked through that, but after you all approve that, then it goes into our program inventory. And it becomes something that goes on to, which is another thing I could talk about for quite a bit that we've changed, is an annual process to assess all of these programs with you in a unified sort of way. And so it goes into our program inventory, gets added to that assessment in that continuous improvement cycle. So that's what I wanted to share today. And then this morning, I understand last night and probably during the visit, you had other questions about UA. We kind of had a pre-conversation, but are there other things I can answer for you? Yes, sir.
Thank you. Quick question for you. So this process right now today, I suspect you get a fair amount of these, and then to kind of dovetail off that too, with the new unified accreditation process, I suspect it's really an incredible opportunity to expand your classes across the system. So I suspect you'll see a lot more of these requests for collaborative programming. And I'm just curious what your thoughts are there.
Yes. So that, when we talk about that part where I'm evaluating all of the input, the thing that I consider is not just about whether the program is needed and how they're delivering it, but what market they're delivering it to. So is it online? Is it accelerated? Is it face-to-face, geared towards a traditional student? And all of those things matter in terms of meeting the state's complete need. so we have students come out of high school and they want a traditional model. We've got to be able to provide that. But should we provide it at every institution? What if Joe wants to specialize in that online component and delivering those programs? Can we have one program that's face-to-face and one program that's delivering online? Certainly seems to be space for that. I think the model that you've heard a lot about here, CBE, that Ray is actually a national leader in, is serving a different type of student, a student that is just can't participate in either of those two modalities. And so we have conversations about, now that Ray and his team are experts in that CBE modality, and they're meeting a different market demand, how could we spread that out to the other institutions? And that's where I'm kind of tying back to your question. There's interesting ways to do that now that we have unified accreditation. He would have been in the past, before NETCHI allowed us to do this, he would have pretty much been locked into delivering all the programs themselves. Now, all of our provosts in the room have the ability to talk with Ray and say, well, we have a program and we have expertise. We want to do CBE. Can you help us with all of that startup, the expertise and the infrastructure and in all of those things that go along with it? And Ray can provide that foundation for the CBE, and the other people can participate in it. So yes, we absolutely have had those conversations, and more so than just volume, because we're not looking to, we have reduced resources. We're not looking to duplicate a lot of things. We're looking to see, are there markets that we're not serving, and can we do that in a more effective way?
It's a great answer. And it really is. It's a first in the nation effort here. So it does create some, there's some challenges of getting it underway and learning it, but it also is an exciting time to broadcast your class through the entire system. More opportunities. Thank you very much.
Yeah, absolutely.
Other questions for Vice Chancellor Placido? Robert, thank you very much. And thank you for your opening remarks. And Joe is particularly thankful for the metaphor about flying the plane while building it or whatever. Building the plane.
Yeah,
that would look better.
But he's grateful for your help.
Thank you. Let's move on to research and innovation. Vice Chancellor Franny Mundy.
Thanks, Chair Riley. Good morning, everybody. While we get the PowerPoint up, I'll just do a quick reminder. It's been 18 months now since Chancellor Malloy initiated the concept of having a Vice Chancellor for Research and Innovation. And I want to just give you a sense of what's happening currently, but also to point out that because this is a new role and a new opportunity, the stance we have taken is to be very much based in what we can learn from the other campuses, as well as what the University of Maine brings to the table, and use all of that to try to expand, amplify, and improve our research, development, innovation, operation across the system for those who are interested in doing so. And we've just had phenomenal response and interest from across all of the campuses. So I'll just give a brief update today on what has been happening lately. A lot to say about, we can go to the next one. Thanks. Oh, I have it. Sorry. Too much to coordinate. Okay, so fiscal 23 earmark updates. You've been able to see this in the press. We're very grateful that the Senate and House, following the leadership of Senator Collins and our entire delegation, have released the draft 23 appropriations bills for the federal government, including almost all of the requests that were put forward by our delegation. So tremendous partnership among the universities, the system staff, and the delegation. I would like to give special credit to Sam Warren, who has been the major interface for so much of this work. I would also like to add that this is new work for us, or renewed work. The last times we had earmarks, lots of us weren't here. So we are learning how this works, and we're working closely with the delegation offices who've been fantastic and wonderful. So 53 million put forward. Many examples spanning the system, including, for example, in this part of the state, expanding the University of Maine at Augusta dental programs with these dollars to create or to propose a new dental clinic in partnership with UMPI. So we are very happy that the the earmark process is pulling forward great ideas from across the system, and in many cases will move them all the way through to funding. This was the 23 update, of course, 22 concluding soon with the federal government, and therefore we are also in deep conversation across the system. Individual projects that have been advanced now through the accounts into the agencies, where there's individualized work that goes on, essentially project by project, with whoever the funder is and however that works with whatever the agency is. And so Trustee Michaud and I were speaking about this last night. I think we're getting in place a system now that is working very effectively. And my message to everybody listening, first of all, gratitude to Senator Collins and our entire delegation, and also to faculty and staff and students on our campuses who have ideas that you think may fit into the earmark process. Now is the time to begin to generate those and to begin to discuss them. And I'll talk a bit more about how we're trying to make this even more of a systemic process. Another major source of funding that is benefiting the system, the $35 million coming to us through the Maine Jobs and Recovery Plan, the federal recovery dollars that are now being passed on through the state. And we've had a process in place now for many, many months to divide up those dollars, and also then to work with the state's complex process for approval. And although these slides were in a while ago, I can tell you that there's been quite a bit of updating. Everything has now been fully approved except for one, which I will mention, by the state. So we're very grateful for the state interaction and for moving our business cases part two business cases have all been moved forward now. So these projects will begin to take shape in the coming months. Some of them are well along, others will be gearing up. And one feature of all of our MEJRP, as we call them, MEJRP projects, is that they have a commitment to putting some dollars aside for workforce development. It's a very strong emphasis here on the economic development and prosperity of the state. And so even all of these centers and facilities are going to be expected to design programs that are accessible to students, that enable them to take advantage of the most modern facilities and then be more prepared for the workforce of the state. The only one that's on hold is the UMaine Food Innovation Cluster and Food Quality Lab, and that will be moving forward, we hope, soon. But the rest of these coming along, and therefore the small campus program that is a part of all of this, we'll be able to start to make some decisions and move some dollars out quickly. So that has been a very important part of the activity of the office in collaboration with colleagues across the system. We have been doing our best, as we hear from faculty and administrators, to try to provide the kinds of supports that will help expand the research enterprise as it makes sense on individual campuses. And we have now identified cohorts of wonderful faculty who are engaged in every campus in trying to build their own research programs or build collaborative programs more broadly. So you can see here some of the things we've been doing. Jason Charland, who I would also like to credit, has been the leader of so much of this work. The Research Affiliates Program, which spans all of our campuses and the law school, being renamed to be called the Research Ambassadors Program, because we are now gently letting these folks know that part of their job is to spread the word about the possibilities of research on their own campus, and increasingly to engage their students. That's been key in all of this work. MRTA and I-Corps and the commercialization activities that are coming out of UMaine are being expanded to include everybody, so that we're able to take some of these great research ideas and help support what it takes to move them into commercialization. And that is another whole set of skills and knowledge and connections that we're hoping to build and grow. There's a terrific amount of outreach going on. We've had one-on-one calls, Jason and I, with all of our presidents, I think now, to try to really understand their goals and interests for their campus relative to research and development, and how they would like to try to move it forward so that we can provide customized help. And also looking for ways to help connect the researchers across the campuses with one another. There are lots of broader areas that are coming up through these discussions. And so in a later presentation, maybe in a couple of months, we'll have more to say about other parts of the UMaine research infrastructure that we are working to make more accessible more broadly. I would add the Office of Research Development, which is Jason Charland's office, has already been heavily engaged. but we are already now connecting to the Office of Research Administration, particularly as some of the earmark grants are coming in. We're getting some questions and trying to provide support and help as other campuses build up their own capacity. The Office of Research Compliance is one we are learning has a number of things to be considering both at the University of Maine and beyond. And so we're trying to be helpful there. High performance computing, data curation, and all of the other kinds of domains that go along with research are in the mix right now. We're hearing from faculty a number of questions that are going to lead us to more discussions broadly, largely about access to databases and library resources, where we need to find some system level solutions, hopefully supported by our unified accreditation tool, to enable faculty and students across the system to get access to the research assets available, I think largely at UMaine and USM. So we're going to need to find ways to make that more possible and open to others. In the last week of April, the Office of Science and Technology Policy announced that they would be implementing a very broad-based new requirement that says that any research based on federally funded studies would need to be made available to the public in a very short time frame. There has been a lag that's been allowed for publication and for other reasons, but by the end of 2025, the agencies are to have in place processes for how this will work. And for us, that will, for all universities, that's a major change and major topic. So it's getting discussed nationally in various groups that I'm part of, but it's also going to need to be taken up in the system. Very briefly, I wanted to call to your attention a number of UMaine research initiatives that really are available to all of the University of Maine system. These are the invention of our terrific Vice President for Research and Dean of the Graduate School, Cody Vararamian, who over the last few years has built these, essentially these began mostly as virtual collaborations. I think it's probably not quite fair to say they were websites to start, but they are websites that point to a well-developed work that exists on the University of Maine campus within the research enterprise. And so here you see the topics of these initiatives, and they've all taken slightly different shapes going forward. Some of them have become places where the members of the group, which is very open, so people could just sign up to be a part of any of this. The members of the group come together and write research proposals. They find one another through these groups. We sponsor speakers and events and student engagement in all of these areas. And increasingly, I think, finding that those connections are making a difference. People are finding folks across our campus and on the others and outside of the university with whom to connect. The last of these that I would like to mention is the Institute of Medicine, which is about advancing human health. We had a spectacular lecture this week on campus by an alum who spoke about his research in Alzheimer's disease, Alan Butterfield. So again, we're using these as opportunities for convening, for calling attention to the cross-cutting areas that are really driving research funding in the country today, and hoping that we're able to build capacity and wanting to make those very open. One big accomplishment in this period, again, Jason has worked with a number of people to make sure that we have a system-wide license to this database, which, as you can see, has many advantages, but in particular, it allows researchers and students to enter their profile and then get customized funding and fellowship recommendations based on this new database. So we see this as a big accomplishment, being able to work across the system to fund this kind of an asset for our researchers going ahead. And then the last thing, and the president's, and we will be discussing this in President's Council this week, is about trying to regularize and make a bit less complicated our many processes for calling for concept papers. We've talked about this almost like the common app for concept papers from across the system, but relatively simply all we're going to do is have two deadlines, and this will be a pilot. We'll see how this goes, where we really do encourage all of the campuses and call widely for faculty, staff, students to put forward proposal ideas, to put forward concept papers that may then be well matched to any of the standing funding opportunities that we exhibit, plus potential as UMS transforms continues to unfold, certainly for the earmark process. These will be relatively simple, we hope. We don't want to put huge burden, but the idea is to get the idea together and get the idea articulated, and then the teams will be able to work to try to match them well to those opportunities. And so we're doing some things to work to help everybody get ready before this first October 20th submission date, because on the different campuses, as we talk to folks, there are very different cultures and traditions and ways that ideas get shared. And so we're looking to be as supportive as we can to share ideas with one another. And as I say, we'll talk in President's Council further this week. So wanted to just give you a sense of where we are. In general, the response always, in fact, the response that we're getting from faculty around the system is one of gratitude and excitement. They're finding colleagues, they're finding ideas, they're able to reactivate research programs that haven't always been active. And what I'd like to do from this position is just continue to encourage that sort of growth. And then as we see the infrastructure that needs to go around it, try to build it as needed. So with that,
Thank you.
questions?
Questions? Great story of collaboration. Anybody, any questions? Thank you, Joan. And in my eagerness to get us back on schedule, I cut off Robert. So we now need to hear about the Lewiston Auburn campus, and I apologize.
Well, clearly I'm not Robert, but I am here just to kick this off by way of a quick explanation for new trustees or the guests with us today. A short time ago, VC Lowe and I were asked to work with the group at USM to try and look at ways that they could potentially repurpose or reuse some of the space at the Lewiston Auburn campus, what we refer to as LAC. So over the last year or so, there's really been some incredible work done in that area. It was very swift, and they worked to do a needs assessment with the community and several groups that are involved in economic development and workforce development in that area. They created a needs assessment, a community needs assessment, and the results of that work was actually presented to this group in May of 2022. And since that time, we were also pleased to have President Edmondson join us at USM, and she and her team have begun to champion that work and take the needs assessment and begin to see what pieces of that might make sense for what they're trying to do as an institution or what some of the other campuses are trying to do with their program growth. So really for this update, I felt that it would be more appropriate for President Edmondson to talk to you about how they're viewing the needs assessment and their next steps. And then I think Robert will talk about it from a more systems perspective. So
great, thank you.
Thank you so much, Carolyn and Chair Riley. I have some remarks that I've prepared that have had input from Jean Paquette, who is the Vice President for Corporate and Workforce Development and our LAC Administrator, as well as Becky Conrad, who led the needs assessment, and members of my cabinet. And so I will read those so that I'm true to the input that they've had. This is really a collective effort for all parties involved. The Lewiston Auburn campus is important to the University of Southern Maine and to the Lewiston Auburn region. It is the second largest urban area in the state with the most diverse population for a city in Maine by a slight margin. It is imperative that the region has a public university where people can reach their aspirational goals and become strong contributors to our communities and the great state of Maine. The needs assessment report written by Becky Conrad with input from more than 100 community partners pointed to regional needs in healthcare and education. These conversations with community members are ongoing. USM is committed to working with our sister universities to determine the best slate of programs that will address these needs. Based on the report and current successful programs, it seems prudent to focus on healthcare and education needs that involve clinical and field placements that can be accommodated in this region. USM is seeing success with existing programs that should continue at LAC. The Masters in Occupational Therapy program has an excellent reputation and enrolls approximately 100 students who come from across the state and the region. UMS offers nursing programs at LAC that enroll approximately 70 students, and these students complete clinicals in the LAC region. The UMA Dental Assistant Program, and yes, the University of Maine Augusta is important to note, is housed as LAC and it has a full cohort. The Social and Behavioral Sciences major, which leads to careers and graduate programs in social services, education, public health, and public policy, enrolls approximately 229 students. And although the degree can be accessed fully online, the face-to-face courses are primarily offered on the LAC or Portland campuses, and many of the faculty offices remain at the LAC campus. USM also has a commitment to the employer community and workforce needs, including the incumbent workforce and helping to meet retention needs. LAC should be an incubator for ideas, and it should create pipelines for the workforce. USM expertise should be of service to the Lewiston-Auburn region. In addition to existing programs, there is potential to offer additional impactful programs. For example, K-12 teacher shortages in Lewiston-Auburn and across the state provide an opportunity for USM to work with the Department of Labor, the Central Maine Community College, and local school districts through apprenticeship programs to educate current Ed Tech 1 employees so they may advance through the career ladder to meet the credentials required to be the classroom teacher of record. We are also exploring how USM Global Talent our USM Global Talent Navigator may play a role in working with the immigrant community members who are seeking employment in the region. In the short time I've been involved, I can clearly see there's a strong commitment to establishing and maintaining partnerships with the employer community so we can offer internships and experiential learning opportunities and take an active role in developing pipelines for Maine's education and healthcare workforce. We will look to expand our services and our programs, particularly those that contain an experiential component, and we will do so in collaboration with our sister universities. In fact, this is an item for conversation at our upcoming President's Council meeting. As these programs become established, we will consider how to engage community members who may use the LAC as a point of entry for degree completion and other educational needs. Thank you, Robert.
Thank you.
So I wanted to take this topic as an example of the previous topic, and I love what President Edmondson had to say, and their willingness to collaborate on this is very evident by everyone. But to put this in more simple terms, we have a resource in our state, in a community that has lots of outstanding need. That resource costs a single institution a lot of money. It's actually a net loss for them to operate. If you were just to do a business case analysis on this, the recommendation would be to close that resource's doors and consolidate themselves back to Gorham and Portland. But there's context. There's context within the state. There's political ramifications. There's lots of people who have interests in here. But more importantly, there are community members that can be served. So how can we leverage the unified approach to come up with some new solutions? And I can tell you that, and I've really enjoyed working with their interim provost, Adam, sitting back here with us today. Their willingness to explore these opportunities, even though that is a USM resource, with their colleagues. So using that process that we talked about before, there is an engagement level like I've not seen before. And it's inspiring to me how this is coming together. So the LAC historically tried to be operated like a full college. They had all the courses there, but that's really wasn't the point. The point is that you need more community engagement and you need a broader set of offerings to meet all those community needs. So imagine this now, we have OT there right now that has a clinical component that can be served in the community. So there's occupational therapy. We have dental hygiene coming in from our partners at Augusta. Med tech from both Ray and Joe coming in there, which has a clinical component, perhaps an MLS coming in there in the future. We have talked about some physical therapy programs that are being considered. I don't want to overpromise here, but all of a sudden a theme, and we had nursing there, perhaps teachers, which then of course have to have that work experience in the community. So now you've got a solution that is being delivered by multiple universities at one place and serving the needs of the community and not forcing some collaboration for the sake of collaboration. And at the end of it, how thematically it works together. The sharing of those resources, MedTech, the MLS, for example, use a lot of the same equipment. It's health related, it's community outreach, and it will work and be effective. And all of these programs are growing in our country, in our state, and are needed. So it just felt like a great time to just to be a bit inspired. I know I talked about process. My colleagues always remind me that we don't lead through process, but certainly we have to manage through process, but to be inspired by the ideas that the chancellor mentioned earlier. We have a tourism collaboration going on that could be elevated to be a national spotlight. The MGI folks, Matthew has been on that group from the very beginning, leading the way in an innovative approach, the foreign language idea that's going on here. But this Lewiston idea will be, I think, something phenomenal in a spotlight for Maine moving forward. So
Thank you. Trustee Kane.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm going to channel former trustee Peggy Rotundo now for a moment, because I know if she were still on the board, she was still able to continue, she would speak up about the importance of LA College. And I think if we could go back to when you were talking earlier about the very beginning of the founding of the system, if we had had a crystal ball, we would have put a campus in Lewiston, Auburn, right? The population there is younger. It is intensely more diverse than much of the state. The history there of business, of manufacturing, of growth, the intersection of all parts of the state, particularly the western part of the state there, it certainly, we can't go back and do that, but it is especially important that we keep our eye on the prize in Lewiston, Auburn. It's a dynamic area of the state, a dynamic set of communities. And I think we have a responsibility to be there in a meaningful way and seize upon those opportunities and meet the needs of that population in partnership, of course, with the community college, which has a significant presence there in Auburn with Central Maine Community College. But LA College has an important role to play, and one that has not gotten the kind of attention it has deserved for a long time.
Mhm.
And so I'm hopeful we can move to a new set of focus in that direction.
yeah, thank you. Absolutely.
Great. Trustee Alexander.
Thank you. I join in the need to put this as a high priority for the system to focus on. I must say, looking from the outside, it had seemed for quite a while that it was the lost child of our activity and systems. So it's very good news to hear about the revitalization of the discussions and the programs. It would be very helpful for me if at this meeting, I understood what it means to call it a college, how it is actually technically connected to USM or the system as a whole. That's just a fact question. But it would be very helpful if we could have a really up-to-date update about what's going on, what the plans are, what the discussions are, what the intent is, and what the objective and goals are with respect to dates and plans and expanded enrollment and programs. So that would be very helpful from my perspective as a trustee.
If I could just address that very briefly
Yes.
and try to be helpful. This was seen for a long time as the exclusive purview of Southern Maine. And as the steps to reorganize and reinvigorate, we stepped in. And Carolyn Dorsey and Ryan Lowe were put on the committee by myself for the purpose of making sure the system played a role, which we had been denied the opportunity before that to be actively involved. And so what you're hearing about is what's developed since that time. This was an intentional act. Once we discovered how lagging the effort was.
That's helpful. But
Oh, the college, historically, I'm sorry, I'll
That's
answer that
okay.
one. Historically, it was called a college, acting, I believe, by itself, Southern Maine ultimately changed the name of that at some time in the past. We'll find out exactly when they made that change. And that in and of itself caused a level of consternation within the community. Ultimately, a consensus to live with the change that had been made by Southern Maine was accepted. But I'll get you specific dates, but predating my arrival here.
no, I know there's a long history
Okay.
here. Yes, I knew that. I just don't know the history.
Let's keep this on the, sorry, Trustee McMahon.
As someone who lives just outside the Lewiston Open community, but who has been involved in the community for 40 odd years, I would make a couple of observations. It's clearly been the stepchild of the university system, and it's been the stepchild of education in Lewiston Open. Central Maine Community College is the preeminent educator in Lewiston Open. And we need to admit that fact. We need to work very closely with Central Maine Community College, and we need to see what services, what facilities we can share. So for example, Central Maine Community College raised money, put in new fields, electronic scoreboards, their artificial turf, not grass. They have everything that was being desired here. That's actually in place. So if we want to attract students to Lewiston Open College, we need to have some form of MOU, some form of partnership, so we can use those facilities so our students can actually be there. The other thing that I'd comment is, and this is a wider concern, if I look at nursing programs, and we have nursing now at LAC, we have it here, we have it at Full Kent, RNO, etc. The community college pass rate for the NCLEX exam is far superior than the university system. In fact, if you look at Lewiston Auburn, I know it's only 1 year and it's only a snapshot, but in the May or June, whenever the last NCLEX was in 2022, I think there were 48 students from Central Maine Community College took the NCLEX. 100% passed. 100% passed that NCLEX exam. I won't embarrass anybody by reciting some of the NCLEX results from the university system. So to sort of bring it all together, as somebody who's been passionate about the community, who volunteers an enormous amount of hours in the community, who recognizes its cultural diversity, please work together with the community college. It is a real asset. And if I live long enough, I'd really like to see the relationship develop, as we saw last night, between Ray and Tim at Northern Maine Community College. And it was interesting. Both of you said it's the only city that has a community college and a university campus in the same city. Now, I agree with you, technically, Lewis and Auburn are separate cities, never the twain shall meet. But I would say that there is a second community where there is a community college and a campus. Please work together.
Yeah. President Edmondson.
Trustee McMahon, I just want to assure you that I hear you about the importance of the community college. I'm pleased to report that Jean Paquette has a wonderful relationship with the president of the community college in Lewiston Auburn, and we have plans to meet in the very near future and to find ways to collaborate closely with them.
Glad to hear that.
Anything more, Robert? Are we? Well, this is the, oh, sorry, Trustee Flood.
Thank you. I'm just piling on what Trustee McMahon had mentioned about the similarities. the similarity that I heard in yesterday's presentation from the community college gentleman was also mentioning the immigrant population and the needs for they had different needs, and they had so much diversity here and they had so much diversity in how we're hearing in Lewiston, Auburn, and it seems like that same issue is in two locations that seem to be primed to prepare themselves to do maybe new things. And this subject area is fraught with maybe making missteps along the way, but it seems like there should be some way of finding an ability to meet some of the special needs of the immigrant community in education at these two locations.
Good point. Okay, let's in the interest of time, move on, but recognize the board is keenly interested in making sure Lewiston Auburn keeps front and center. So let's keep this on the agenda and keep updated. And I think we're all keenly interested in this new collaborative approach to bring multiple campuses, universities together to bring resources to bear and to collaborate with the community college. So it's very promising and very exciting and long overdue. So hooray. Thank you. Let's move on to the speedy Ryan Lowe for his report on Vice of Finance and Administration.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Three items that I will be covering briefly this morning. We'll be talking a little bit about investment results, a short budget updates and how 23 is shaping up. And then Nate Harris will join me for a quick review of the 5-year capital plan. So let me start with investment results. As always, the July investment results are included in your materials. I'll note right up front, just like last year, we've started off with lots of ups and downs in the market. July was up, August was down. Today, the market is up quite a bit, and I'm sure it will change by the time I finish this report. The managed investment pool with a market value of 349 million saw a gain of 4.8% in July, followed by an estimated loss of 2.6% in August. The pension fund with a market value of 21 million saw a gain of 3.7 for the month of July, but gave all of that back in August with a loss of 3.8%. And then finally, the operating fund with a market value of 310 million, a much more conservative asset allocation, saw a gain of 1.2% for the month of July, a loss of 0.9% in August, brings the estimated net investment income through the first couple of months up to 1.1 million. And we have a budgeted net return of 2.6 million for all of fiscal year 23. So certainly off to a little bit better start than we were at this time last year. Again, I'll note, as I've mentioned before, the operating fund closed out fiscal year 22 with a loss of 3.9% or a loss of 13.6 million. That compares with a net gain of 22 million in fiscal year 21. So $33.5 million swing between the two fiscal years. Not that uncommon. I did look back the last few years. We had a net positive in FY20 of 8 million. We were up 22 million a year ago, down 13 this year. So as often happens in your returns, it does smooth out if you look at it over time, but can be pretty scary in the fiscal years. I'll move on to a budget update. We're in that unique 2 to 3 month window of the year where the campuses in the system are working on closing out fiscal year 22. We're in the first quarter of fiscal year 23. We're getting ready to prepare for fiscal year 24. So exciting times in budget land. I'll talk more about the year-end results for fiscal year 22 when I talk to you in November. I'll talk more about fiscal year 24 when we get together in January. Today, my focus will be on the schedule for changes for this current fiscal year 23 budget. For the last several years, we've made changes to the current year budget at the first FFT BOT meeting that falls after the fall census date in October. Our campuses make fall enrollment predictions almost a full year before students arrive on campus, so it's not unusual for us to need to make these type of budget adjustments. Although we have several weeks before census, just a couple of weeks into the semester, most of our campuses have a pretty good idea of how enrollment is shaping up in relation to budget. And as such, campuses have started to discuss some of the options they'd have available to close that gap if they're a campus that needs to make budget adjustments. We've encouraged those conversations to begin early, given the tight time frame between census and the October FFT meeting. Been working with Trustee Cates to plan on a plan for campuses that need to make budget adjustments to present those at the October 26 FFT committee meeting. Typically, we'd present you with a summary of what shortfalls are occurring. So, for instance, enrollment at one of our campuses might be off by 5%, and we factor in the mix of in-state and out-of-state students and come up with a tuition shortfall number that tends to get impacted, tends to also grow larger with the impact on room and board at that time as well. We'll present options at that meeting for closing the gap on a campus by campus basis. Again, we'll bring those to the October FFT meeting where we'll answer questions. Hopefully we'll get the committee's endorsements, and then we'll bring those back to this full board at your November 13-14 BOT meeting. The last item I have was the 5-year capital plan, and I'm gonna just introduce that. And thankfully, I see Nate off to my right, who's going to take over. Again, happy to introduce the 5-year capital plan to the full board this morning. We've discussed this in detail at last month's FFT meeting, and Nate Harris is going to follow me to cover some of the high-level details of the plan. I am excited we're at the point where we can present a plan at this level of detail. Although there's a certain amount of caution whenever you're putting together plans where funding sources are sometimes years away, sometimes they're unknown when projects are being developed. I really wanted to at least acknowledge the great work that the campuses have done to identify a variety of funding sources. We're committing more of our own internal resources. We've been more successful in convincing the state to make increased investments. We've captured more federal funds. You heard President Farini-Mundi talk about several of those sources. And we've raised more dollars from private sources. And so all of those contribute to a much better plan. So with that, let me turn this over to Nate Harris. Nate is our System Associate Director of Planning.
Good morning. Thank you, Vice Chancellor Lowe. Just make sure everybody can hear me okay. Yes, okay. Well, good morning. As Vice Chancellor Lowe stated, I'm Nate Harris. I'm the Associate Director of Capital Planning, and I'm going to give you just a quick overview of our 5-year capital plan. Just as a reminder, this is part of our 3-tier capital planning process. So you have the master plans that are developed to look at the overall long-term development at each university. We have this, which is kind of our long-term capital plan looking out over the next 5 years. And then each year we develop a single fiscal year capital plan that shows how we plan to improve our infrastructure over the coming year. Now, when you look at this plan compared to our 1-year plan, it is more aspirational in nature than that 1-year plan. So you will see funding sources that are not fully developed, and those could be listed as to be determined. Those could be revenue bonds that we have not yet issued, or those could be grants that we anticipate but have not yet received. At the same time, this is a snapshot in time. And so this is designed to basically be a guide for how we plan to spend the funds and not a straitjacket as we advance through the coming fiscal years. Overview, this 5-year capital plan is over 400 projects at $1.1 billion. This represents a 12% increase in our planned expenditures over last year's 5-year plan and includes over 100 additional projects. So you can see the slide up before you. This is a breakdown of the categories of funding, of where we expect funding to come from over the next 5 years. And rather than read all of these to you, I would rather just highlight a couple of notable changes or adjustments compared to last year's 5-year plan. So as you look at both our revenue bonds and grants, that is an increase of over 200% over the last year 5-year plan. At the same time, our auxiliary and E&G funds coming from the campuses at $94 million, that represents an 84% increase. So the universities are looking to spend their money in the existing facilities to keep those facilities up, to create an attractive environment for students. Finally, I want to highlight our to be determined funds, the last bullet there. That represents 32% of the overall 5-year plan. But this is actually a decrease when you look at last year's 5-year plan of 10% compared to the overall budgetary number. So the universities are doing a lot more work at trying to identify funding sources rather than just putting out a TBD and hoping to work that out later in the future. Next slide, please. Here is the same data, but looking at the project category. So how are we going to spend our money? And so I'll start with that top line, the $317 million in space renewal and renovations. This is money going directly into our existing facilities. And that represents 29% of our overall plan over the next 5 years. I do want to highlight building systems at $68 million. While you looked at in real terms, it's not a lot compared to some of these other categories. We did see a significant increase of almost 99% compared to previous plans. And the majority of those systems spending are going towards your HVAC projects. So not only are these improving our life cycles within our buildings, these are going to improve the NAVs of those buildings, but these also should improve our energy efficiency within those buildings as we upgrade aged, deteriorated systems to newer products. I will highlight the $415 million in new space that's planned. That should come as no surprise for anybody who's been on Orono or down at USM. There's a lot of building going on and there's a lot more planned. Now, this is kind of a double-edged sword in many ways. New buildings are great and they reduce the overall age of our facilities. When you look at our portfolio, it improves our NAV across the portfolio. But at the same time, we have to keep in mind that in the long term, this can increase some of the operations and maintenance funding that university is going to need to keep up these new facilities. Many of the new systems are more technical, more advanced. So not only more expensive to fix, but you need a workforce that's been trained on fixing those types of systems. The last one I'll point out, because it is new, is we have a category for athletics for $39 million. So we've not kind of broken that out separately in the past. We thought it was important with all the investment that's going into athletics over the coming years to kind of capture that. But this is still a work in progress. It's fairly easy to look at turf fields or stadiums and throw those in athletics. And this year, anything associated with athletics, we kind of pulled into this category. In the future, we may look at some areas where we can break that out a little bit better. So for example, if we have an athletic facilities and we're updating the HVAC, we're improving the system, that is actually something that Gordian will look at and track versus turf field, which they would not. So we need to do a little bit of improvement as we go forward, but I think this was an important first step to highlight and track the investment we're making. So overall, we can take off the slides if you'd like. One of the things we always look at when we look at the capital plan is how does it compare to the Gordian targets that are set for keeping up our existing facilities. And so this year we worked with Gordian and they kind of did their magic, and based on a couple of different inflationary scenarios, they estimated we need between $244 and $394 million going into existing facilities to keep up those facilities and reduce our maintenance backlog. If you look through our capital plan, 40% of that overall capital plan, $434 million, is going towards those type of projects. And so if we execute as planned, we will exceed the target that's set by Gordian. This is a really important thing to note. And this is hopefully the start of a trend. If you look at our FY23 one-year capital plan, if we execute it as advertised, we will meet the target for FY23. That's the first time we'll have met the Gordian target in 10 years. So this does show a refocus in investing in our existing facilities and hitting some of those key metrics that we talk about as far as renovation age and improving our NAV. Just to damper the optimism a little bit, I do want to caution that as we look at the money going towards that Gordian target, the $434 million, $234 million of that are funding sources that do need to be further developed. So those are either listed as to be determined. Those are revenue bonds that will need to issue in the future, or those are grants that we're hoping to receive. And so there's additional work to be done, but from a planning perspective, the universities seem to be doing all the right things, and not only improving the portfolio through new buildings and infrastructure, but investing in what we have as well. So the last thing I just want to bring up is we are continuing to look at ways to improve the way we do our capital planning. And I think many of you would agree that this process has improved over the past several years. But capital planning and project management did hire a consultant this last spring to look at our capital planning process and make recommendations. And so while we'll be bringing those recommendations forward in the future, just some things that we've talked about on ways we can improve are strengthening the links between priorities, both the priorities of the system and the priorities of the university to the plan and how we articulate that. We want to look at how we monitor the execution of the capital plan while it's happening to be able to provide feedback on any changes that we've had to make or areas that we may need to adjust during execution. And finally, we want to look at, as we bring these plans forward or projects come forward, that we look at the funding availability based on the type of funding we're expecting to use and how that may not only impact project timelines, but how using certain sources of funding may limit our opportunities in future years. So with that, this kind of concludes my briefing, and I certainly welcome any comments or questions you may have.
If I could just to kind of build on a couple of points that Nate mentioned, just again, super excited to be at this point in the process. I was here when we didn't have plans at all. I was here when we had plans, but we didn't really necessarily follow them. We couldn't find a lot of funding sources to back them up. As I've said often, our strategy was generally all about general obligation bonds. We'd go to the legislature every year. We'd ask for 70 million. You'd go through that process and we'd get 20 and we divided 27 ways and we would do a whole lot of nothing. And then every year we'd get the Gordian report back and it would be super frustrating. The report, I think last year was so frustrating because at that time we'd been doing a lot of really good things. We had identified funding sources. We had started to move, but it always takes the needle quite a while to catch up. And so now that we're at the point where we're actually starting to see some of that progress, we've got a long way to go and we need to keep up the momentum. We certainly can't take the foot off the gas, but it's very encouraging to start to finally see some results, to finally hit that minimum target. We've had that chart that shows the minimum level of investment in our budget presentations for a number of years. We've never even come close to getting anywhere near that minimum target. And so if that's where we end up at the end of 23, we'll be doing some celebrating.
Thank you, Ryan. And Nate, questions? Trustee Flood.
Thank you. Ryan, I appreciate what you have done and your staff and the committee has done. I think you should be happy. I mean, you should be seeing a change. But my question is just simply on the large proportion of our success is going to be based on revenue bonds. And of the revenue streams that you're looking at, which ones would you say right now are solid ongoing streams of revenue that you feel really, really comfortable about? And which ones are kind of, we're developing in the process that can you categorize the two and how
Yeah,
solid
so
they are
there's
in each?
two generally kind of revenue streams that we use for revenue bonds. One is internal. So a campus wants to finance $10 million. They identify, $600,000 a year for the next 10 years. Those ones are always shaky because the budget situations of our campuses go up and down. And so a campus may be in a great situation now and think that, a $750,000 debt service payment, that's not a big deal. We can do that. And then things turn around, you lose some enrollment. And so that one's challenging. The place where I'm very encouraged is our efforts with the legislature, with the executive, and the debt service that they support. So separate from general obligation bonds, they have given us debt service funds, including $7.5 million a year for the next 10 years last year. And then we use that revenue to go out and to secure a revenue bond. It means we don't have to ask the state for 75 million. We can ask them for 7.5. We'll just do it 10 different times. And it's weird that it's easier that way, but when you've got good data, it's also helpful. It's not just give us $75 million because it's it's 2 years since we asked last time. Now we can go in and, as we did last session, and said, well, if you give us 7.5 million, here's all of the great things that we can do. Here's how it's going to move the needle. And we've been able to convince both the governor and the legislature a couple of times. And so we've moved that base appropriation that in 2012 was $865,000 that we originally got for some ADA renovations at Memorial Gym way back in the day. And now we're getting nearly $17 million a year from the legislature for that debt service piece. So that's one I feel very good about and hope to, if we're not as successful in a general obligation bond, to go back and make another argument for more investment there.
Thank you. Anybody else? Any questions? Trustee Cates.
I just wanted to say that looking forward, one of the things we're not really talking about so much right now in our capital planning is how that spending fits in with our strategic plan, because we at the moment we don't have a strategic plan. We're going to have
the next section of the agenda.
we are going to have
I feel like you are.
we're going to have a great strategic plan before too long, and then the individual universities' strategic plans will fit within that. But until we have that strategic plan, our ability to make intelligent decisions about where money goes for capital planning and for capital investments is somewhat limited. So we're going to hopefully get through the next period of time making wise decisions. But I think all of us really understand the importance of the strategic planning committee and the priorities that will set for all sorts of things, but on this topic on capital planning. Thanks.
Great. Anything else? Nice segue, Roger. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Vice Chancellor Lowe. Let me ask Emily Kane, the chair of our strategic planning committee, to set up the discussion that we're about to have with Vice Chancellor Dorsey.
Thank you very much. And Roger, I don't know, pay you later for that tee up. That was perfect. Thank you. I'm very excited to report that the strategic planning committee, which is no longer ad hoc, but is now standing, had its first standing committee meeting 2 weeks ago today. The goal of that meeting was to really try to bring us together as a committee and create some alignment and some sort of a baseline level of understanding of how we got here, the work that's already gone on, and an understanding of next steps. We were very pleased to have representatives from the faculty, staff, students, and presidents as members of that committee join us for that meeting. That will be the case going forward, as well as others who joined in. But we had an extensive presentation from Huron, which is our consultant for strategic planning, about the work that's already happened, where the inputs have been, where the gaps are, and teeing up a round of fall meetings to all of the campuses in the next few months, where the goal will be to go back with just Huron, without any other voices in the room, to really go back and do a deeper dive. We also will elevate, and I'll do it again here in this public meeting, the resources that are online for strategic planning that are available to the public. The data book, which is really the grounding, in some cases anchoring, in some cases enlightening data book that we have that really looks at what we're facing from an enrollment perspective, from a budget perspective, and also the links there for input and questions that are open to the public. And we're asking people to please send that out through their network so that others, as many people as possible, can participate. From a next step perspective, we'll be updating the committee schedule document with a regular standing meeting of this committee ahead of every board meeting, like all of the other committees, and continuing to work to understand the data. And our timeline is pretty much intact, I would say, for this plan to land in the new year. And I just want to acknowledge there's a lot of work that goes on beyond just our committee, which I know Carolyn is going to talk about. And we sort of articulated the role of this committee as supporting, guiding, and then ultimately approving the strategic plan, and then also holding ourselves accountable as its implementation goes forward. So we'll have a lot more conversation in future meetings, a lot more opportunities for input. And I'm really grateful for all the work that's already gone on and for the initial steps that are taken for going ahead.
Great. Thank you, Ellen. Vice Chair Dorsey.
Just one
Vice Chancellor.
question.
Yeah, sorry.
Yeah,
Trustee-
question for Emily, and I want to follow up on trustee McMahon's comment this morning. As you move forward with your strategic plan, are you considering some of the issues, whether it's here within Presque Isle and Northern Maine Community College or Lewiston Auburn area or other areas of your strategic plan, considering how can you collaborate in a meaningful way with the community college system?
I'd say, yeah, thank you, Mike, trustee Michaud. The good news is all of that's very much on the table and front and center. I think we still have another round of information gathering to do from the communities, the campus communities, and also a deeper understanding of the work that the presidents are leading now, because we want to make sure that anything we're doing at the system level is adding value to the campus plans, and helping to align them, if anything, and not subverting them in any way. So yes, I would say that's definitely part of the conversation, though we're, I think, very open to not having any predetermined outcomes at this phase, because we want to make sure that the community input that we're getting can be completely understood, as it is presented, and not with any sort of predetermined outcome. But I would say, yes, that certainly is something that's come up.
Okay, thank you.
I really have just very little to add to what trustee Kane just announced. It is to add to what she said on the work that's happening outside of this committee, the board's committee. There are two other groups. One is a working group of which Rosa Rodonit is a member of, and some others around the table, and also an executive team that meets weekly with Huron. Jeff St. John and I sit on that team along with Rowena Kluge from the Chancellor's office. We meet with them every week to look at the timeline, the budget, and make sure that we are tracking, the way we would like to, that progress is being made, and that we are keeping the costs to a minimum. We offer support to them as they're trying to work through the fall visits and the different items that trustee Kane just talked about. They're looking in the fall to, as she said, go back and visit the campuses. They've been gathering information for quite a while, and they've created a list of themes that they believe have been emerging, but they want to take those themes back to the campuses and make sure that they're getting it right. They understood correctly, that they're articulating the thoughts and ideas that they've heard at the different campuses correctly, so that they can get feedback on that. They're also working more closely with the President's Council. They're meeting with them at every single meeting and going to continue to engage in those conversations, and with a list of external stakeholders. They're continuing to reach out to them and follow up in conversations with several external stakeholders. So with those groups, what we're looking to do is be sure that some sort of a draft of all of the themes can go to the different groups that we've discussed already for review and feedback, and that keep it on target, as trustee Kane said, for completion in potentially the fall of 2023. Any questions? Yes.
Just because we heard a presentation about the Lewiston Auburn College and the activities that already exist there, is that group of stakeholders on the list of those being consulted about this strategic plan?
Yes, and
thank you.
Yep, that's great.
Yep.
Any other questions or comments? We will make that deadline, Carol. We will make it. Thank you very much. Okay, let's turn to action. This has been a great discussion morning, though. Let's ask President Brini Mundy to take the podium, and we will take to tab 9 and 10. The first is the athletic field improvements increase at the University of Maine.
Trustees, is it okay to do that from
It
here?
absolutely unequivocally is.
Okay, because then you don't all have to turn around. I'd like to try to do this without slides and just speak through these topics. And our Vice President for Finance and Administration, Joanna Stremski, is here to help us with questions if we have them as well. So today on your agenda, we have a request before you that has been put forward by the FFT committee to authorize the University of Maine system acting through the University of Maine to expend an additional $26 million up to now a total of $40 million for constructing and making improvements in the phase 1 priority projects of the Harold Alfond Foundation funded athletics initiative at the University of Maine, and also to continue the design work under this athletics 10-year master plan. So this has been discussed and considered at FFT. I'll say a little bit more about this overall in a general way. Just a reminder that The Harold Alfond Foundation made an award of $90 million to the University of Maine system and then on to the University of Maine for an athletics capital master plan over a 10-year period. So these dollars will be coming in over those 10 years. And there's also a requirement of at least a $20 million match, on which, by the way, we're making very good progress. So that $90 million then has been allocated tentatively to a number of projects as we begin. Phase 1 projects include a new soccer venue, the renovation of the field hockey venue, and renovation of the softball field venue. And for those three, we are asking for an increase in what the board had authorized for us as we are seeing the construction costs escalating. The second area, priority 2 projects, a small request for scoreboards and lighting that would happen in the Alfond Arena, and then the design work for phase 2, which will lead us to a way to think about more specifically the costs of that second phase of design, which includes the Sean Walsh Center addition, track and recreational field, the Mahaney Dome replacement, multipurpose arena, and Alfond Stadium upgrades. And so we're asking for an increase in the board's authorization of $7 million there, up to I'm sorry, is that right? Yes, up to a total then of 26 million in addition to what you have previously authorized for us for this effort. And in part, this has to do with wanting to move the project forward more rapidly than over a full 10-year period. And we're very excited about what's happening already and looking, of course, to be good stewards of these resources that the Alfonds have gifted us.
Questions? Questions? If not, let's go to this short resolution. That the Board of Trustees accepts the recommendation of the FFT Committee and authorizes the University of Maine system acting through the University of Maine to expend an additional 26 million for a total of 40 million to construct and make improvements to the phase 1 priority projects and to continue design work under the athletics 10-year master plan, with all final terms and conditions subject to review and approval of the University of Maine system treasurer and general counsel. Additionally, the Board of Trustees approves issuance of an internal University of Maine system loan to the University of Maine for up to 21 million as determined by the treasurer for the purposes of funding the above noted projects with a total of $40 million. Can I have a motion?
So moved.
Moved by trustee Kane, seconded by trustee Cates. Any conversation? And we need to take the roll from the, you want to start there, Ellen?
Do you want to call the roll from the room first?
We are good. We will, because yes, we will let's call first. All those in favor? Raise your hand. All those opposed? Abstentions?
Trustee Donnelly?
Yes.
Great, thank you. The motion carries. Let's go to the ASCC building addition increase for the green engineering.
Okay, thank you, and thank you for that on the athletics. Our second request to you today is to increase the authorization for the work that we are doing on the green engineering and materials, the GEM factory of the future, by up to 13.8 million in external funds to bring that authorization to 15.3. Let me just say a word about GEM. This is a part of our overall enhanced effort in engineering and computing to grow what's possible for the students of Maine and beyond on the UMaine campus and in partnership across the system. GEM would be a facility that would expand the Advanced Structures and Composites Center, which I know many people here have visited. This is one of our major labs with major international work in floating offshore wind technologies and 3D printing and a variety of other related areas. Most recently working in 3D printing for what could be low-cost housing. Part of what we need in GEM is more space. We need, or for this area, we need to be able to have a larger 3D printer that will enable the prototyping of larger vessels and structures using advanced technologies that are being invented at the University of Maine relative to the materials that are used and to the processes for the printing that happens. So GEM is a very, very exciting centerpiece for us, which has already attracted funding from a variety of important sources, including the Maine Jobs and Recovery Act, NIST, Department of Defense, there's an appropriation. We're awaiting that pending award. And so we are eager to keep moving on the planning for GEM so that we're ready to go as soon as we have the funds and the plans for future spending. And therefore, we have this resolution in front of you today to keep going with next steps in design.
Thank you. Questions on Jim? Trustee Alexander.
I think you said external funding. Could you define what that means?
So for something like this, because there are so many organizations that are interested in the University of Maine having this, we work very closely with a number of federal agencies together with our delegation. So we have sought funding through earmarks. We've sought competitive funds for this. We're seeking other ways to get basically any federal dollars that will be supportive of this activity. At the same time, of course, there will be internal expense for this as well.
Is there any breakdown between the external and the internal that is available?
Yes, I believe that's in the board materials. So I'd be happy to look through that with you.
I could look through that. I just didn't know where the question might be answered. Thank you.
Any other questions? Seeing none, we'll go to the resolution that the Board of Trustees accepts the recommendation of the FFT committee and authorizes the University of Maine system acting through the University of Maine to expend up to 13.8 million in Maine Jobs and Recovery Act funds, in addition to the previously authorized $1.5 million in campus reserves, for a total of 15.3 million to complete design, facility and equipment and ancillary pre-construction costs of a green engineering and materials factory of the future, with all final terms and conditions subject to review and approval of the University of Maine system treasurer and general counsel. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Moved by trustee Michaud, seconded by trustee Kane. All those in favor? All those opposed?
Trustee Donnelly.
Yes.
Great, thank you. It's great. Let's move on.
Thank you very much.
Onward. Let's move on to the tenure request.
So it's my honors this morning to present you with this tenure request. The Chancellor and the University of Southern Maine have requested that Dr. Jacqueline Edmondson be awarded tenure at the rank of professor in the Department of Literacy, Language and Culture at USM, effective on board approval, and she would have the option to assume a full-time faculty position upon the conclusion of her services as University of Southern Maine president.
Thank you. Any questions? Seeing none, the resolution that the Board of Trustees accepts the recommendation of the Academic and Student Affairs Committee and approves the granting of the rank of professor with tenure to be effective upon board approval to Dr. Jacqueline Edmondson, and that Dr. Edmondson has the right to return to the University of Southern Maine faculty with the rank of professor with tenure in the Department of Literacy, Language and Culture upon the conclusion of her service as the University of Southern Maine president. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Moved by trustee McMahon, seconded by trustee Kane. All those in favor? Opposed?
Trustee Donnelly.
Yes.
The motion passes. Thank you. We next turn to tab 12 for the confirmation of faculty and student representatives to the board. The faculty representatives we know well, Matthew Bampton from USM, Patrick Cheek from UMA, William Otto from UMM, and a new student representative, Rachel Smith from UMaine Machias. And I think it would be appropriate to have the president tell us something about this new appointee.
Yes, so we're very excited that Rachel Smith is being put forward as our student nominee. She's a senior marine biology major, concentrating in coastal conservation, and has minors in botany and zoology. I think, can't read my writing. Comes from Bradford, Maine, has had a number of experiences in her time as an undergraduate, working with the Down East Institute and other organizations where she's getting great hands-on experience. Very active in student organizations across UMM. She'll be a great representative to the board.
And in the interest of time, but not just to thank those great members who are currently members for being willing to be reappointed. So thank you so much. Let me read the proposal that the Board of Trustees approves the appointments of the faculty and student representatives to the Board of Trustees as presented. Do I have a motion? I have trustee Alexander and second trustee Bartholomew. All those in favor? All those opposed?
Trustee Donnelly.
Yes.
Great. The motion carries, and thank you so much for your willingness to continue to serve, and welcome to Rachel. We now turn to the confirmation of the Board of Visitors appointments, which we have in the board material, and I think everyone has seen. So can we go right to the proposed resolution unless anyone had questions? Okay. The resolution that the Board of Trustees confirms the Board of Visitors appointments at the University of Southern Maine and the University of Maine at Machias for 2022-2023 as presented. Can I have a motion?
So moved.
Moved by trustee Kane, seconded by trustee Martin. All those in favor? All those opposed?
Trustee Donnelly.
Yes.
Great, the motion carried. And now we move on to the consent agenda and Vice Chair Pro Tem Martin.
I move for the Board of Trustees to approve the consent agenda, including acceptance of the minutes as outlined in the meeting materials and the items as forwarded from the August 22nd, 2022 Academic and Student Affairs Committee and the August 24th, 2022 Finance, Facilities and Technology Committee. The consent agenda items are tab 14 through tab 18 in the meeting materials. Could I have a second?
Second.
All those in favor? Any opposed?
Trustee Donnelly.
Yes.
Motion is carried.
Motion is carried. Thank you.
Great, and tab 14 is acceptance of the minutes. It was the consent agenda. I jumped ahead. I'm going to discussion items, aren't I?
Yes.
Great. Tab 19 is the proposed changes to the Board of Trustees Policy 401, CHRO Loretta Shields.
Morning. I'm here to propose changes to policy 401, which is our policy for general equal opportunity. And the reason for the proposed changes is due to changes in state and federal law, as well as the American Board Association standards have also been updated to align clarity for our community. Additionally, this would also support the chancellor's imperative for change one in that it supports the goal to rebuild the system that is fair and just for all people. There is some sense of urgency to this request as the American Bar Association recently revised their standards to require accredited law schools such as Maine Law to have a policy in place prior to fall 2022 semester that states it will not discriminate against certain protected classes that are not currently in our policy 401. These changes are important in demonstrating to our community our ongoing commitment to diversity, equity, and inclusion. Some of the current protected classes not currently included in our policy and are stated in the state statute includes ancestry, gender identity. Our current policy identifies gender expression only, physical and mental disabilities. Our current policy currently states disability without clarifying the language. So we're making adjustments for that. Current protected classes not included in our policies and that are required by the American Bar Association accreditation is ethnicity, gender identity, and military status. Executive Order 11246 states that a contractor that lists only one or few of the protected bases will be required to list all of them in order to be in compliance. So the objective of this is to make sure that we are in compliance with the changes in the recent, as far as expanding and giving definitions in those particular categories. And they are highlighted in your workbooks in reference to exactly what those changes are, entail.
Thank you, Laura. And this is policy change not requiring a board vote. Questions or comments? Great, thank you. Tab 20 is a proposed Board of Trustees policy 315, a new policy on commemorative naming, and our clerk will talk us through that.
Thank you, Chair Riley. What's in front of you today is a proposed new board policy 315, naming and renaming of academic unit and programs. This was developed at the request of the campuses. It's to help them define the process for naming of those groups. We had a suggestion from USM. We had a proposal from USM to name a, to name a school, and there was not a formal process. We took board policy 803 as our template, which is naming and renaming of physical facilities. There was a small working group that worked on this proposed new policy. We also had very broad input from stakeholders. It's before you today for your suggestions. The suggestions coming from the ASA committee this month, as well as this board meeting, will be brought back, incorporated into the policy, and it will be forwarded to the ASA committee in October. Thank you, October, and then the November board meeting for action.
Great. Any questions? Comments? Okay. Thank you, Ellen. And since you mentioned 803, let's talk about that next.
Board policy 803 is naming and renaming of physical facilities. As we reviewed this policy to build the new policy for 315, we discovered there was some gaps in the approval process. We wanted to make sure that the two policies were in alignment. So the only change that is being proposed is to incorporate the approval of the Vice Chancellor at the appropriate level in this policy.
Comments or questions? The materials are, of course, in the board book. Okay, thank you. Let's turn to tab 22 first. Congratulations, President Edmondson, on your tenure. And we would like to ask you to take us through board policy 301.3. Sorry. I'm sorry.
Yes. Okay. So the mission, I'm sorry. The mission statement is the result of a process that was ongoing at the university for more than a year as our faculty, staff, and students participated in a process to develop a mission statement that would reflect both the strategic plan that is currently in place and their hopes for the future. They were pausing on asking for that policy or for the mission statement to be approved until after I was in office, and I have been very supportive of it, and I felt that it was a very inclusive process, and so I'm pleased to bring that forward to the board.
Sorry.
That's fine.
Any questions about the mission statement? I would like to say it's so much more precise. It's really lovely to read it.
Thank you.
Any questions or comments? Okay, great. With that, we have completely confounded Sedesco because we're ahead of schedule. So now we have idle chatter time. Now we have, we can break, and as soon as we can move into our executive session, and as soon as lunch is ready, we can come back and get it. And we will do that. So with that, I would just remind the members that our next meeting, no?
We shouldn't start executive session until lunch is ready. So we'll just need about 15 minutes.
Wow. Okay. All right. Well, the next meeting is November 13th through 14th, hosted by the University of Maine at Farmington. So with that, we will conclude, take a break. Why can't we start? Okay, we've got to get technology ready for the executive session, and we will take a break for 15 minutes. Everybody check your office, check your email. We will reconvene in the alumni conference room, which is directly across the stairs, across from here on this floor. And we will do lunch in our executive session then. Thank you all. It's been a terrific meeting, very, very engaging conversation, which always makes for a good meeting. Thank you.
Right, I'll show you. I was thinking about. You got it.